What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo MLB Deeper Dive. I am Eric Lindquist, joined alongside Alex Baker for the second consecutive day here. We are presented today by Jock Market. We're going to talk through all of their goodies that they are offering for us today. But first, Alex, how are you doing after yesterday's 13-run Houston Astros bloodbath that we both endured?
Yeah, I mean, that one was, I think we correctly identified as the best stack of the day. But
Yes, we did.
in tournaments, we're not guys that play the best stack. We got to find the stacks that no one else is on. So ended up being a little bit of a rough day for me. How to turn out for you?
Oh, just absolutely horrendous. So anytime the top stack's going to go off most times, unless I'm like just overweight on Coors for whatever reason, which is probably a rarity for me, it's going to get ugly. And it wasn't just 13 runs. As you said before the show, it was a game where the over hit and a team got shut out. That's never ideal. Jose Urquidy was pretty owned, I would say, on both sites compared to even what I thought he would be or what he should be. And man, he just mowed down some Baltimore Orioles. It was problematic. No.
Yeah, I had a ton of Robbie Ray. I think he did okay, but Urquidy ended up being the higher scoring guy. And Bauer actually he held it together despite this pitching substance ban. So far, man, like it seems like it hasn't really made a huge difference.
I will say, if somebody was going to figure it out, like if somebody out of every pitcher in Major League Baseball, it might as well be the mad scientist who's still going to figure out a way, whether it's his arm angle, whether it's going to be his change of grip or whatever it is. That dude just tinkers all the time, throws a bajillion different pitches. So maybe that's something where he might be better off than other elite pitchers that might have one or two pitches that they're really relying on. But I don't really know about that. We'll have to get some long-term sample size. But either way, we're going to get this thing started for you guys here today. Today's show is, of course, presented by Jock Market. And if you have not heard, Jock Market has turned fantasy sports into the stock exchange. Forget about waiting until the end of games to make the money. Jock Market allows you to buy and sell shares of players in real time with guaranteed payouts for all shares paid out at the end of the night. So NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. There's definitely an NBA game going on tonight as well that you'll probably have some interest in. You can make real money every single hour, every minute, every second of any match or game. So use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players. Then you buy, sell, or hold them during the game based on your analysis. Download the app to get started or use our exclusive Awesemo promo code. Definitely use our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. This is an offer that is exclusive only for you at the Awesemo community, so make sure you take advantage of that. You ready to get started here, Alex?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. First game on the board. We've got Baltimore plus 162. Still mad at them, but whatever. At Toronto, 4.9 implied runs for Baltimore, 6.3 for Toronto. Of course, we're looking at this Toronto side. We know that these bats are going to be very, very popular. You're going to see them at 6.3 runs for an implied total. It's strange, though, because there is some disparity between the two over on DraftKings and FanDuel. But before we go to any of the hitting sides that we definitely need to have interest in today, talk to me about these pitchers, because Dean Kramer and Anthony Kay are not the most well-known individuals in fantasy baseball.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I was working on some of our home run prop stuff, and Dean Kramer's home run rate is just like popping off the page. I think he gives up like 1.3 times the average number of home runs or something. So, I mean, not having a very good year so far, and Toronto
That's
is
a
one
nice way of putting it for him. He's not doing very good. That's very true.
A 6 xFIP, and he's going up against a team that has a ton of power. So this is just a spot where everything is indicating maybe we should play Toronto. The temperature in Buffalo today, where they're playing their home games now, is about 73, just about average. Now, I don't remember a ton about the park, to be honest, but it's not like a major league park. It's pretty good for bats, I think. So it's easy to understand why the over-under is 10.5 here.
Yeah, the AAA Buffalo ballpark that they're playing at, little shorter fences, I would say, is I think the one thing that I do remember about this ballpark. Obviously, if you're keeping track at home, they were playing in Florida at the beginning of this season. They won't be in the Rogers Center until Canada and US reopen the border. That's, I don't know. I heard it was going to be only a couple weeks away, but I don't know that to be true. We're not going to get into international affairs here on the MLB Deeper Dive. Probably going to stay in my lane here. So talk to me a little bit about both of these stacks, because that's really where the interest is going to lie in this entire game. As you said, big over under on this game. Toronto right now, 12% top stack percentage on DraftKings, coming in at 13%. So pretty flat back and forth with them. For the Baltimore side, we're seeing a little bit of positive leverage for them on DK, and they get that little ninth inning bump in a shorter porch. That might be a good spot to be going to. What are you doing with bats in this game?
Yeah, I think you can do some lineups with Toronto. What we're seeing today is there are several really good teams that no one team is going to take all the ownership. So Toronto does look on DraftKings like an appealing play. On FanDuel, a little bit chalkier. So maybe they would be a team you might want to be a little under on. But I noticed the bottom of their lineup is pretty bad today with Panic and McGuire. So it does make it a little bit tougher to get unique here. But the top of the order is all like really solid players. So it's easy to come up with a stack.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't see a way around on DraftKings getting there, and on FanDuel, oh man, it feels like Houston all over again in my life. I'm definitely a little bit triggered from yesterday, so hopefully that doesn't end up working out worse for wear again. For the Baltimore side, anybody that really sticks out for you? I mean, I feel like we talked about them a little bit yesterday. They put up a complete dud, but Trey Mancini, that's going to be somebody that I'm always going to be playing quite a bit as a one-off. Anybody else that really sticks out to you meaningfully on that team?
Yeah, I mean, Mullins having a fantastic year, but I gotta take a shot on is Mountcastle. He has really bad on base percentage this year, 28%, but above average on getting extra bases. So this guy fits an extreme boom bust mold to this point. So this is the kind of guy that you might want to target in fantasy, not super high owned. And he's at the top of the order.
I think that probably does it here. I mean, we probably don't need to tell you to play bats here. We probably don't need to tell you not to play pitchers here, both not jumping out in any kind of a meaningful way in the top pitchers tool. We'll move ourselves along, make up a little bit of time. Now going to the one Houston Astros, which obviously for the last 3 days have just continued to, I don't know, cause me pain and suffering. So happy to have them on the slate here again today, but possibly being somewhat playable. They're at the top stack over on DraftKings here for the day, coming in at 14.5%, 14.3% ownership share, but big favorites going into Detroit. That should be no surprise going up against Jose Urena, who has just been bad. He's not a very good pitcher whatsoever. The last 3 years, just terrible metrics. 46.6% hard hit percentage this year. 475 expected slugging. Doesn't get swings and misses. Not that Houston swings and misses anyway. 13.9% K percentage on the season. And on the other side, Luis Garcia, a very good pitcher, I would say, at this point in time, coming in with the second highest chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 30.5% over on DraftKings today. Definitely check out those rankings. They are free. The top pitchers tool on DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo for today are completely free. So we'll be talking through those constantly with you, but a little bit higher owned than his top 2 percentage, but that's not really something I'm worried about. He's 8,700 on DK. What are you going to be doing with Luis Garcia?
Yeah, I think he's been having a good year so far. 28% strikeout rate, 3.6 xFIP, and the Detroit Tigers make anyone who's a good pitcher look like an absolute ace. So Garcia does seem to make sense here. The Tigers lineup today, not really popping as far as getting on base or power, and they strike out more than average. So all in all, a good matchup for Garcia.
6.1 implied runs for Houston. We've got Miles Straw at 2,400 there on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he's going to be 2,500, going to be a value option. Leading off there, Jose Altuve taking a seat here today in that starting lineup, up and down that lineup. he's been on fire. So, I mean, Miles Straw is definitely a downgrade in that leadoff spot. So I feel like it's going to be very concentrated. And we're seeing that a little bit here in the ownership on both sites. Kyle Tucker, again, just a value piece that people are going to be getting to in that 6 hole again. Yordan Alvarez, everybody else is kind of the usual suspects with the exception of Altuve. How are you handling such a chalky spot for Houston? And I guess we don't have to worry as much with the ownership. It's pretty flat compared to what it's been for the last couple days.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between today and yesterday is there's just a lot of other teams in really good spots too. So that's making Houston's ownership less today than it was yesterday, while their chance of success is somewhat close to being the same. Urena, never a guy for fantasy we play because he doesn't really strike out guys, but he's a below average pitcher by pretty much every metric as well. So that's a plus. Detroit, 80 degrees today. So that's another mark in favor of Houston. And then they have a pretty strong lineup to begin with. So really, I actually like them a lot better today than I did yesterday, just because there's a lot of other teams taking the ownership. So they're relatively lower owned than they were yesterday.
So I'd asked you yesterday about Tony Kemp, and I think the same thing kind of applies, even maybe in a more meaningful way with Miles Straw. He's going to be leading off. He's going to garner ownership just because of that, but not a guy who hits the ball very hard. 24.5% hard hit percentage on the season, 326 expected slugging. K's at a little bit higher rate, 19.4%. He's quick. He's the fast guy in the leadoff spot, can possibly just get on base and move around a little bit, but I don't have a ton of interest. Maybe is it possible I can just remove him from my pool and stack up the rest of the Houston Astros and find that to be my path to getting a little bit different with this team?
Well, I don't hate it because Straw being so much lower price than the rest of the guys will garner a lot of ownership. But I usually don't mind picking the guys that steal a ton of bases, don't get extra base hits, because they can bail you out once they get on base. So if, for example, he gets a hit, a steal, and a run, that's like 10 points. So that gives him enough upside to be valuable.
All right. Well, I'm just biased against guys who don't hit the ball very hard. I don't these little slapstick speedsters, not my favorite in the entire world. But on the Detroit side, anybody that you might be looking at picking a one-off or two? I mean, we've seen some power out of Jonathan Scope here of late, but it just doesn't look very appealing on this slate to be going Detroit's direction at all.
Yeah, Scope is extremely expensive on DraftKings today. So if he was a better player, maybe as a contrarian option would be interesting. The one guy we got to talk about is Akil Baddoo. He's been far surpassing expectations so far this year. And now he's worked his way to being the leadoff hitter for the Tigers. He steals bases and hits for power. It's cheap. So I think he does make a good amount of sense today.
Yeah, and only 4.1% ownership coming in on DK here at the moment in our last run. So I could see myself getting to a little bit of that in the leadoff spot, multiple at bats for him there. Yeah, I think that probably covers it here as well. Houston, my goodness, please don't completely torch me today, because I think that, as you said, there are some other spots that are very intriguing. Going to the Boston game, that's a spot even in this ballpark down in Tampa Bay, plus 108, 9.5 implied runs. That should just kind of speak to a little bit of how good these offenses can be. 4.9 implied runs for Boston, 4.8 for Tampa Bay. Nick Pivetta on the bump there for Boston. He's garnering quite a bit of ownership today. This is going to be a big talking point. What we're going to be doing with a guy like Nick Pivetta. Gives up some decent hard contact, but a 27% K percentage on the entire season. You know, this Tampa Bay team can be effective, but 26.2% K percentage against righties on the season. That's the second highest in all of Major League Baseball. But on the other side of it, a 108 WRC plus, so they can get some damage done. How are you handling Nick Pivetta in this spot?
Yeah, I think you cited some interesting stats about Tampa's strikeout rate, but today the lineup they're rolling out is a little bit lighter on striking out. Wander Franco, who was called up a couple days ago, he strikes out about half the league average, so that just kind of decreases the team strikeout rate enough that it's a minus matchup instead of a +1. The park is a great one for pitchers because it's a dome. So I like the park factor. But the price on Pavetta on DraftKings seems egregiously high. On FanDuel, a lot cheaper. The only thing is, I mean, he's not a guy that goes particularly deep in games because of control, but I think he's a fine play on FanDuel, but not exciting.
Yeah, so you cited, I'm going to counter right back there. Something that I've been noticing a lot too is whoever ends up in that shortstop spot, now getting Franco in there. Willie Adames getting traded over to Milwaukee. 30.8% K percentage. In 2020, he actually had a 36.1% K percentage. That was bottom 2% of the entire league. So that was definitely a strikeout bat that was playing just about every single day that's no longer in that Tampa Bay lineup. So I really like that point about Franco, about the potential for Nick Pivetta here, not just looking at the ball club the way that I did for just the right-handed split for what they were before, but looking at them now. Franco also batting higher in the order as opposed to like Adames, who would have been in the 6 hole. Definitely going to be advantageous for this team in preventing strikeouts going forward. But I still like Nick Pivetta a little bit. I mean, it's hard to find a lot of qualms. I mean, if you want to get different on this slate, it is just so hard. Plus, Pavetta's 9,500. We're seeing a little bit of positive top 2 percentage for him over on DraftKings. As you said, over on FanDuel, a little bit different, maybe unnecessary. 7,800. He's getting a little bit more ownership there, so maybe not going to as much of him there where he's already being owned and taking more of a stand there on DK. But talk to me on the Tampa Bay side as well. I mean, obviously I don't think you have any interest in Michael Wacha, but I'll let you correct me in case that is the case.
Yeah. So you make a good point that the odds of him being a high scoring pitcher are pretty good, and that has a lot to do with just this being a weak slate for pitchers where the expensive guys are priced up a little bit too high compared to their skill levels. So that does make everyone look a little bit better than they otherwise would on this slate. Now, Wacha, I don't know if he's really going deep enough in games to consider at all. So I cross him off my list.
Yep, I'm doing the same there. So we got to talk about the Boston bats here on this side. We know the kind of potential that can exist there. Xander Bogaerts, the one guy who's garnering a little bit of ownership here now. Considering Franco now is third base and shortstop eligible over on DK, and he's up to 3,800. He won't be a bazillion percent owned today. So Xander Bogaerts makes for a good option, 4,800 over on DK. But anybody else stand out to you over on the Boston side of things?
They look pretty appealing as a stack. Michael Chavis is batting lead off, and he's super cheap. So he's garnering most of the ownership on the team. I think if you add up the rest of the batters, they equal about his ownership. So that's really elevating the ownership in our top stacks. So I do think that you can, I don't mind playing him, but if you build a stack with the other Boston guys, it could be going under the radar a pretty good amount.
I really like that take. I mean, that's what I'm planning to do with Miles Straw already, I think. Actually, you know what? I'm going to actually have a little Miles Straw now at this point in time. I can't go against the number one player in the world. That seems like a bad thing to do with my long-term prospects of for MLB DFS, especially this sport, which you just kind of dominate all the time. Not yesterday. Neither of us dominated yesterday, but I think, as you said, hopefully some people learned some bad lessons the last couple days and continue to ride with this chalk. But going over to the Tampa Bay side, this is a team that I think if Nick Pivetta is going to be garnering the ownership, I could play both sides of this. I have no problem really going that direction. We've got a number of cheap options. We still have 3,800 for Franco, which will not be his number over on DK going forward, I would expect. I expect him to be an over 4K hitter pretty darn quickly here, coming in right around 11%. I think that makes for a good hitting option. Over on FanDuel as well, Tampa Bay looking like they're the outside of Brandon Lau, who's nearly 20%. Another team that if you remove him and Franco from, you're getting guys at like around 1-2%, and that's Austin Meadows, Randy Arozarena. We know that they just have an amazing amount of pop, both under 4K. What are you doing with some of these Tampa Bay bats?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting contrarian options, maybe just taking some stabs on those guys. They are expensive, but have home run power. Franco, again, continues to be a little bit underpriced, but not at all to the level of I think it was yesterday where he was like 2K or something. So still a good guy to target. And yeah, the stack as a whole might not be the greatest, but you can pick out some individual batters here.
Yep, agreed with that as well. Also, something that I'm sure you'd agree with is the fact that Awesemo Plus's tools and content for nearly every DFS sport is about as good as it can possibly get. So check out the weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. And if you're a new Awesemo user, get Awesemo Plus Platinum with the promo code MLB Deeper Dive, which is showing up on the screen with Jordan behind the glass helping us out here. That's MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And of course, if you're looking to only play MLB DFS, then sign up with Awesemo Plus MLB weekly package for only $15.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Also free Britney, but that's just a sidebar that I just had to throw in there. Atlanta minus 105 at Cincinnati, 10.5 implied total. I mean, if we're going to be talking about spots on this slate, we don't even know who's going to be pitching yet for the Atlanta Braves. Have you seen anything specifically? I have Jesse Chavez in there at the moment. Is that confirmed yet?
Yeah, I think he's the opener, so bullpen game today.
All right. Well, that's good to know at least. So that's good luck to him against this Cincinnati team. But 5.7 implied runs for both sides of it. Tony Santillan on the other side, he's not very good at pitching baseballs here. 92.8 exit velocity, mile per hour exit velocity, 18.1 degree average launch angle on the season, 54.2% hard hit percentage. I don't know. That screams a lot of home runs to me. What does it scream to you, Alex?
I wouldn't be surprised. Like the guys in this game pitching, not the best prospects, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's probably just I don't know. I guess we do have an hour-long show. Maybe we could talk more about it than what people want. But I really don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm looking at his pitch mix. Throws a four-seamer 52% of the time. Throws it with a 95% velocity. But, I mean, we just don't have a ton of numbers on him here. He's 24 years old. Looks like he's just getting barreled up with a 12.5% barrel percentage. Not getting a ton of swings and misses, 20.5% K percentage. Just seems like a really, really good spot to be targeting this road team, this Atlanta team. It's going to be interesting. I mean, if Dansby V. Swanson ends up leading off here again, I mean, we're seeing some ownership kind of going the way of the Braves, and I think that that's definitely justified. Do you want to talk about anybody specifically on that team? They're going a little bit over-owned on DraftKings, but FanDuel specifically, maybe going to a little bit more. Talk to me about Atlanta.
Yeah, they're very solid today, of course. Cincinnati, 78 degrees, so pretty solid temperature. And the matchup versus some newbie pitcher, definitely one that we want to take advantage of. So the nice thing about the Braves is pretty much everyone in the lineup does have a significant amount of power. So you can pretty much stack 1 through 8. I mean, of course, Acuna is one of the best players in baseball right now, so he's a great target among all the other guys that are pretty solid.
Yeah, 6.2K over on DK. Freddie Freeman, 6K. Ozzy Albies, 4.9K. Abraham Almonte has been struggling a little bit here. Still projected, I believe, to be in the 4-hole come today. We'll end up seeing if he ends up in the lineup if we get the opportunity to have Acuna in that lineup here. I don't think there should be any issue with getting him in, but hopefully he's there because I really want to be paying up for him. I'm not sure if people have any kind of an apprehension. It was just lower back tightness, so nothing to freak out too much about, but going up and paying for them seems like it might be a little bit more contrarian. But there's just so many places that we can go compared to what we had yesterday, where Houston was kind of above and away the best offense on the slate. Maybe a case to be made for Oakland, but I don't know. I feel like this ballpark in this environment in Cincinnati, Atlanta might be one of my favorite spots to be targeting, specifically if we get Acuna in that lineup and we're paying up to be a little bit contrarian there. I do know that every single solidified pitching option, whether that's Buehler, Berrios, Luis Garcia, they're all a little bit more expensive. So maybe that might be the case going against it. On the other side of things, Cincinnati, looking up and down this lineup, we know the kind of pop that can exist. Specifically, Jesse Winker, somebody who's just had an unbelievable season, 50.2% hard hit percentage, just smokes the baseball. Joey Votto, Nick Castellanos, Tyler Naquin. Talk to me about the Cincinnati side of it.
Cincinnati, they have some great talents like Winker, Castellanos. As a whole, look like they're just a little bit above average. So in a matchup versus kind of a bullpen game for the Braves, I think they're a little bit intriguing, but I'm not super crazy about them. The ownership looks really low though, so I think that you can get an edge by just taking the stack when they're a little bit underowned. So it looks like pretty much mostly target the top 7 guys. Kyle Farmer, it looks like his stats are pretty dreadful. So pretty solid options all around besides that.
Yeah, it's on FanDuel, they're getting quite a bit of ownership. It still looks like they're in the double digits there, only a 9% top stack percentage. But on DraftKings specifically, where we have some of these offenses where it's just a little bit more clear cut your path to being able to build lineups with them. I do like getting to Cincinnati, as you alluded to, quite a bit of positive leverage going their direction, 8.5% top stack percentage, only being owned just above 5%. Definitely another good spot to be going to in this game, in this ballpark. Really nothing else that I can say there. We'll move ourselves along. We're making fantastic time today. Washington, minus 112. I think this is what happens when you go from having a 14-game slate on Tuesday and you're covering that to like 7 and 8 games the next couple days. We can kind of fill it in. But Washington, minus 112 at Miami, 8.5 runs for this one. We've got Washington implied for 4.6 runs, Miami 4.4. I don't really know what to do with those. Those are big numbers considering the Miami ballpark. That should just kind of speak to the quality of these pitchers. Joe Ross is 9,600 on DraftKings. And I don't really, somebody was saying that earlier in the chat, that just sounds ridiculous to me. Is that somewhat justified? And then Cody Petit on the other side, Poteet. I apologize to his parents. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Poteet, we'll go with that. Talk to me about the pitchers here.
Yeah, I'm really scratching my head about this Joe Ross thing. And to top it off, it looks like we have him projected for ownership. So people might actually be playing this guy. I mean, Miami's lineup is pretty bad. They do strike out a little bit above average, but I guess the main selling point is the park in Miami. Being indoors does prevent production a good amount. With that being said, man, I just can't get down with Joe Ross at 9,600. What do you think?
Absolutely not. I don't know. I don't know. The pitching options are so limited, and I guess we glossed over Anthony Kay, who's got a 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, is being owned around 34% of the time. He's at 4K, and that's mainly the reason that's popping up that way. But I mean, Joe Ross is the 5th highest projected pitcher to be a top 2% pitcher on this slate. That just is egregious. It's a ridiculous thing. And so 9,600, I'm happy to just kind of remove him from my pool because there's nothing that really sits there that I'm like, I need that in my lineup. He's got a low K percentage, 22.5% K percentage. Walk rate's about normal, 8.3%. But then giving up pretty hard contact, 38.1% hard hit percentage on the season. Miami's lineup's not good, but I think that they can do enough damage. Then maybe I don't need to go crazy with Miami bats, and I probably don't need to go crazy with Joe Ross because I just don't see the strikeout potential being there for him. Do you?
No. I mean, the short answer is no. He has a strikeout rate of 22% this year so far, which is good, but it's not 9.6K.
It is definitely 9.6K. So let's just go to Nick Pivetta. That feels so much better. 9,500 against Tampa Bay. I don't see a way that I'm going to play any Joe Ross over there. Perhaps on FanDuel, is there a case that could be made for a 7,400 Joe Ross? Would you be consider rostering him over there at all? I mean, he's coming in with 15% ownership, only a 9% chance to be a top pitcher percentage, but on a single pitcher site, he's at least cheap.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good cheap options today, so I'm really looking for someone pretty good. But on FanDuel 5,900, that's kind of intriguing. I don't think Poteet projects as like a real high strikeout guy, and Washington's lineup is a little bit below average in that respect too. But I'm just pulling up Potit's minor league stats here. I guess he only played one game in minor leagues this year, but in 2019 only had a strikeout rate of 14% in AAA. So far 23%. I'm just not really seeing anyone that we can play. But it's or any reason to play him, but it is a slate where pitcher is a little bit weak. I just think there's some decent options that are like 4K, so or maybe it's just Anthony K. But yeah.
So you feel pretty good about Anthony K on this slate? I mean, we can go back and revisit pitching it. It was something I guess got glossed over a little bit, but going up against Baltimore, a lefty against Baltimore is kind of a freaky spot to be looking at. I mean, just looking at some of their splits, Baltimore on this entire season, 21.5% K percentage, and Baltimore, excuse me, a 114 WRC plus 4K. You're willing to go with more Anthony K than anything else?
The one question mark I have with K is that he didn't go very deep in his last game, only went 43 pitches. But in the month prior, he'd gone up to 90. So we're really playing a guessing game here to figure out exactly what's going to happen with his pitch count. But if we have him somewhere in like a reasonable star territory, like 70 to 80, he does grade out as a really good points per dollar play. What are you thinking?
I mean, I think that I want Acuna in the lineup, and I'll play a bunch more of Anthony K, where I'm paying up for him and Freeman, both above 6K. I don't know what Acuna's ownership will get to. I mean, I'm sure it won't be a non-zero number, but I think I would want to be targeting a lot more expensive batters. I would make sure that the 4K went to good use if I'm going to be playing some Anthony K there. As you said, though, if you have even the potential that he could pitch over 90 pitches at 4K against a Baltimore team that, yeah, they've been very, very good against lefties, but even if they were, just a mediocre spot here, he's still 4K. It's hard to really let that go overlooked. On FanDuel, I don't think that there's any reason whatsoever that I would be playing Anthony K, but DraftKings, 4K is 4K.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such a weak pitcher slate that he's on like the first page of our projections, which like normally wouldn't be the case, but
no.
Let's just kind of slate it as.
Yeah, it's not the slate we deserve. It's the slate we've been given, and we must play it because there's no way that I was not going to be playing an 8-game baseball slate here. It's going to be a fun slate, I think, altogether to put the pieces together and try to make sure that you don't have a crazy amount of ownership going one direction or the other. But Cody Petit, as you had alluded to, he's somebody who's started 6 games. We have a very limited sample on him, but giving up nearly a 12% barrel percentage from what I had seen a second ago. If it ever decides to pop back up. Nope, it's not going to pop back up on Baseball Savant. So we're going to just move on. Anybody from Washington that really sticks out to me, I mean, Kyle Schwarber is 3.9K and has just been bashing the baseball of late. We've seen multiple double home run, triple home run games for him here now at this point in time. Just absurd. And now Juan Soto there in the lineup, another guy at 5,600. Put him in the bucket of guys that I'd want to be paying up for. I mean, this Trey Turner-Soto combo looks a lot more appealing if I'm going to be playing Anthony K.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are 2 really good players. Soto, he's been a little bit perplexing this year so far with only a 150 ISO. He's been really good at getting on base at 400. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there because last year his ISO was 344. So that's like worlds apart. But I still feel like he's worth taking some shots on. Schwarber, as you were saying, really great power so far. He's cheap. That makes a lot of sense. Once you get below Schwarber, the ownership really decreases on these Washington guys as well. So the park's not great in Miami, but definitely have a talented top of the order.
And then on the Miami side, if we're not going to be playing Joe Ross and he's going to be popular, I'm definitely going to have at least some one-offs from Miami, maybe some two-mans going with my 5-2s, and then a couple stacks I'm sure I'll have just sporadically throughout there. Nothing to get carried away with, but Jazz Chisholm at the top of the lineup there. Starling Marte, who is still playing baseball despite sending rodents into space. Good job, Starling Marte, with that. Did you see that Twitter video, by the way, Alex Baker?
No, what are we talking about?
Okay, so somebody...
Weird.
Okay, I hope Rin Pack's in the chat here at the moment. Okay, we got Jordan. Jordan's going to be sending it your way. So Starling Marte is going to be getting a phone call from PETA one day. I don't know when that phone call is going to take place, but it will. 2 days ago, I believe it was Greg that we were doing a strategy show together. He's like, how have you not seen this? And sure enough, I hadn't. It's outrageous. But yeah, he decided to shoot a bottle rocket with, I believe it's a rat attached to it. And his buddies and him are like sitting around cheering to it. Good times. Good times. That's the content everybody's here to talk about. But from a baseball perspective, he is in the 2-hole against a popular pitcher, maybe having some interest there as well. Talk to me about the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, I think the Marlins, the park isn't great. The matchup is just average versus Joe Ross, but the prices look pretty appealing. The only thing is there's just no real spend up pitcher that I'm excited about today. So don't really see much reason to go to them, but I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Yeah. So I'll speak for you then. I just don't want a ton of stacks of this. I think having some 2-mans, we've seen Adam Duvall have some double dongs of late too. If you wanted to get to a little bit of him in batting cleanup, sure, but not the most appealing spot to be rostering Joe Ross, not the most appealing spot to be going to Miami. In Miami, we could probably just move ourselves along to Cleveland and Minnesota. This one we'll definitely be talking about pitching. Not JC Mejia there. Cleveland with the 4.4 implied runs, Minnesota 5.4. Yeah, JC Mejia on one side for Cleveland, not getting a bunch of ownership, nor should he, up against this Minnesota team that has a terrible bullpen and starting pitching rotation, but for the most part, just hits baseballs very hard now, is starting to get a little bit healthier, getting Max Kepler back into the lineup. JC Mejia, not a guy I'm going to be getting to whatsoever. I'm curious if you are whatsoever. And then Jose Barrios, of course, on the other side, garnering a bunch of ownership. Not always my favorite guy from a fantasy perspective. I feel like he's a better real life pitcher than what he is traditionally as a strikeout guy. But 25.7 K percentage on the season. Maybe I should be thinking that differently at this point in time. Talk to me about pitching in this game.
Yeah, Barrios, he's always been a little bit under in fantasy skill level compared to real life talent, just because he's not a huge strikeout guy. And the price tag of 10.4K is pretty high on DraftKings today. I think you might be better off spending down at pitcher and up on bats in general. There are some great stacks today. If you have the money, I don't hate it though. And then on FanDuel, 9K, much more reasonably priced. So I think he's a good option. The matchup versus Cleveland, they got a pretty weak team this year, but they don't strike out a ton. So I think it's just about average. The weather in Minnesota is very hot, 85. I'm actually more interested in Mejia. Like, man, he's not projecting well, but he showed some signs of life in his last start. He went 77 pitches, which was his high on the season. And he does have a strikeout rate of 23% so far this year. So if we want a punt pitcher, I prefer K maybe slightly, but Mejia, like, just because I feel like all the pitchers are overpriced, I don't mind just completely punting today and spending up elsewhere.
Oh man, now I'm terrified about the Anthony K, JC Mejia lineups that might be showing up when I hit the old crunch button. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I think it does make more sense than what I might have initially been leading on to. Launch angle, 2.8 degrees as well, 36.7 hard hit percentage. The last start, you said he showed some signs of life, got up to 77 pitches there, ended up getting knocked around a little bit in the later stages there from what I'm looking at. Still ended up against Pittsburgh that definitely have some decent lefties in that lineup between Frazier, Polanco, and number of guys who do strike out more, but can also inflict some damage. 2 homers he gave up there. I don't know. I think that's a little bit of an outlier considering he hadn't given up a home run on the entire season up until 2 in that game. And now looking at this Minnesota lineup on the other side, I mean, we have the usual suspects that are, you've got Josh Donaldson that, I mean, is he going to be back in the lineup? Yeah, Josh Donaldson. So we don't have that lineup out. I don't think he will be in the lineup. He's been out here for a little while, but Kirilloff, lefty with power, Larnach, lefty with power, Max Kepler, who just got back from the IL. I think Nelson Cruz as well. You can maybe be looking at the stack, but he doesn't seem like he's giving up a lot of long balls in that launch angle. Again, a ground ball pitcher. Might this be a spot where we can be lighter on the Minnesota stack, considering they're going a little bit over-owned?
Yeah, I think the matchup versus Mejia and the weather are pretty good, but Vegas is telling us like we don't want to be too high on Minnesota today. 5.4 runs looks pretty good, and the prices are appealing on a few guys, but the ownership is significantly higher than the top stack probability on DraftKings. So I don't mind being a little bit under here. That being said, it does look like if you fade the really cheap guys in RIS and Larnach, maybe you can get a little bit lower ownership on your stack. I don't hate it, but I don't think it's going to be my preferred way to build today.
Same here. And as a Minnesota Twins fan, you're a Detroit Tigers fan. Lovely that we're not on either one of our teams today. That just shows the kind of non-biased opinions you're getting here over at Awesemo.com. Another thing that you're getting at Awesemo.com is the Awesemo Podcast Network. See these segues? I'm cleaning up the
Nice.
hosting gig here. Thank you. I felt good about it. We've got a podcast for every sport, and we're available on every single major platform. So head over to Awesemo.com/podcast to check out the latest. All you have to do is leave a 5-star review on one of our podcasts with your Twitter handle or your email address, and you're eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. We'll have one winner that's awarded every Friday, and I promise you, I know people who are going through these all the time, checking in. They will let you know on Friday whether or not you were the winner. It is every single Friday throughout the entire year, and reviews are eligible to win for up to 1 year. So all you have to do is go in, put in your review there, and I'm sure if you go to a couple of different podcasts, post in some different spots, put the 5 stars, I think those are more opportunities to go out and win. So, if you want to check out the NBA, the MLB strategy shows, anything like that, I promise you, putting yourself out there and making those 5-star reviews and putting your email address, that's going to just give you a couple more opportunities. But best of luck to you all with that. And we have 2 more games to get to. Should be pretty darn easy here. Pittsburgh plus 137. Taking on St. Louis. Looking over at the lineup builder, we've got Pittsburgh 4.4 implied runs, St. Louis 5.1. Chad Kuhl, I don't really ever know what to do with this guy. I feel like he was kind of a punt du jour for me in years past. I don't really know at his current price tag. I mean, is he going to be one of those guys that you're alluding to? Another one of the cheapies to maybe be taking some shots on? I don't know what to believe anymore, considering I just put JC Chavez into, he sounds like one of the Backstreet Boys. And I just added him to my player pool, as well as JC Mejia. I don't even know what's going on anymore.
Yeah, I mean, really, what I'm looking for in pitchers is, at the Mejia K price point, I'm just looking for them to be able to go like 5 innings, because a lot of the 4K pitchers are 4K because they're openers like Jesse Chavez. But once you get up to 7K, like Chad Kuhl, we're expecting a little bit more there. We can't just luck out and have 5 scoreless innings and get there. So the matchup for St. Louis, not a great batting team, but they don't strike out a ton. And Chad Kuhl's strikeout rate so far this year is only 17%. So I don't see much reason to go there. 85 degrees in St. Louis today. So I just don't. I think the price tag on FanDuel 5,800 is more reasonable, but I guess I might prefer Carlos Martinez a little bit more.
Alrighty. Ping into that, because I mean 44.7% hard hit percentage. Ben, not a guy that we've thought about in the past. I mean, he's not the 100-mile-per-hour go out there and blaze it by people. I mean, he's a starter, he's a reliever, he's a starter, he's a reliever. We don't really ever know. It's pretty freaky that I have as much interest in Carlos Martinez as what I do. That's kind of what I was getting at. He's 6,300. It's just, the matchup. I mean, going up against Pittsburgh, we're seeing double the ownership compared to his top 2%, a chance of being a top 2 pitcher over on DK. But I think on a slate like this, where I'm getting the savings, if I'm getting even a little bit more savings off of Chad Kuhl, I would rather take my shots with Carlos Martinez in this spot. I mean, why are we doing this to ourselves, Alex?
Yeah, he's not a good strikeout pitcher either. Pittsburgh's lineup today does have some Ks in it compared to normal though. So, I mean, I don't feel great about it, but it's just, man, there's like no pitchers I feel good about today. The one thing I'll mention is I'm not expecting to build lineups where I have like 2 6K or less pitchers. It just is hard to spend that much salary. So I probably will stick to one of the value pitchers. And Carlos Martinez is a reasonable option, favorite today versus Pittsburgh. He's going deep in games that he doesn't give up 8 runs in. So there's a possibility that he just has a few scoreless innings and puts up, 15 to 20. That's well within the possible outcomes.
So I'm going to take a little deviant tour. We've got plenty of time. I'm going to deviate a tiny bit from this game for 1 second to talk to you guys about the MLB prop tool that we just added here at Awesemo.com. We have MLB strikeouts and home runs. Alex alluded to working on that a little bit earlier, taking a look at some of the home run numbers. And I think looking at the strikeouts, whether it's on other sites, Jock Market specifically, a spot where we can be targeting some of these home run numbers. But I'm going to talk about the strikeouts here for a second. A guy like Carlos Martinez, 4.5 is his line currently around all of the industry, around all of the sports books. 4.5. That under is coming in around 77% of the time with a 23% expected ROI. You can take those numbers and you can plug them directly and be able to play your bets and take advantage of that throughout the entire industry. We have a number of sportsbook links that you have on our website to take a look at. But I'm seeing some opportunities. We'll get to Walker Buehler in this final game, but Carlos Martinez, is it something where maybe I could be going to a sportsbook and taking the under on the 4.5 here and still be playing Carlos Martinez in fantasy, and I can feel pretty good about myself in that way? Do you ever take shots on some of these props and then still roster some of these pitchers?
Yeah, definitely. The main thing is just I don't think any of the pitchers are very good. If you sort by highest ROI on our props tool for strikeouts, under. Like basically people love betting overs, so usually the lines are skewed towards the unders, and we're seeing that except like to a huge degree today. The main comparison point I usually use to like test these for sanity is just simply the number of strikeouts per game. Carlos Martinez has had 47 strikeouts I think I switched here from Kuhl to Martinez. So let me pull up Kuhl.
Okay.
All right, Kuhl has 27 strikeouts in 8 games. That is 3.5 per game. The best line you can find is 4.5. So obviously that seems pretty appealing. So yeah, make sure to check out the strikeout tool. And if you can get some of these sign up bonuses to go along with these bets, you can really clean up on these.
I definitely agree. I mean, this has just been a profitable strategy. We have a number of other sponsors, but I don't want to get into them. You know who they are. We have an opportunity to be able to go and short some of these pitchers. And then on the strikeout or on the home run side of things, I will say one of the more eye-opening things about this tool for me is seeing the inefficient ability. It's very difficult to be betting some of these home runs and to really get yourself in a spot where you're going to get some expected ROI. I mean, and if you are, there are going to be some of these longer numbers. Kevin Biggio sitting 720, plus 720 is expected ROI 21%. Tyler Naquin, who's a batter I definitely like in this spot. That would be a spot where I could maybe go to him where those prop odds, I mean, the yeses just tend to be very difficult to find some ROI in, but it definitely can inform some decision-making on who might be some of the lower owned batters on a slate who still have a pretty good chance of going long ball. So is that kind of how you use that tool, or what are you kind of mainly trying to utilize with the home run tool portion of this MLB prop tool?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, in sports betting, the ROIs that you're looking for aren't necessarily off the charts. If you can get one of these minus 400 ones and it's going to hit 85% of the time, like the amount of risk involved in that is pretty low. So I definitely feel like if we can get 5+% ROI on some of these, that's not bad. So people obviously love taking bets that are underdogs. They hate taking these big favorites at minus 400. That's why these lines are skewed towards the players hitting home runs, and we can capitalize on that.
I just want to point out I sorted by expected win percentage, and the number one guy is Miles Straw, and he had a home run like 2 days ago. That freaks me out a little bit, but I mean, considering I'm shorting him, that makes me feel a little bit better about being underweight to him and some of my Houston exposure. But I absolutely love taking a look at this tool. I think that it really informs a lot of good decisions, not just from a betting perspective, but from your DFS portfolio. And as you said, strikeouts, betting some of these unders. What an advantageous time to be going that direction. I know Greg, my guy in the chat there, saying that it's only betting overs. And I know people like to bet overs, but that's the reason that you want to be betting unders, because if they're betting overs, you know, on the other side that that's already been inflated and baked into the number. I've definitely, in the long term for me in the prop market, I'm making a lot more money shorting players than I am betting overs. I can promise you that. Do you feel the same way, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel more confident betting unders because I know there is a bias. People like sweating the overs. But that's the problem, is like sometimes they can be pretty agonizing to sweat out. I remember I bet this under earlier in the season, and the pitcher had like 4 strikeouts and the line was 4.5. So the big sweat was whether he would come out for the next inning. He got yanked. So I was like, yes. It's like the bet ended in a whimper. It's like, okay, he's just not out there. So there's like a funny way to win a bet, but I'll take a win.
It's like the Joker. I love chaos. Yeah, you gotta be doing a little bit of that. I love it. I'm the same way though. For me, money's money, and it spends the same way. So I'm going to do the things that can make me more money long term, even if that means being underweight to the Houston Astros when they score 13 runs. But I digress. Here we go. We got one more game to cover. I just wanted to be able to share that with you because I think our team did an amazing job. You did an amazing job with this, Alex. Definitely check out some of those tools and take advantage of some of these unders on K props. They are outrageous right now, and the ROI is off the charts. Going to Chicago and the Dodgers, we've got 3.8 implied runs for the Cubbies coming in here to LA. Lovely LA. It's nice outside, but it's not that nice. I'd say it's more humid than normal, which I find to be a little bit strange for this time of year. I believe 60% humidity was the number that I saw in the weather today. I'm an old man who wakes up early now and looks at the weather, so I don't really know what to tell you. I'm just a weird person at this point in time, but 5.5 implied runs for the Dodgers on the other side of this. Let's just go right to pitching because we know that there's going to be a lot of interest in Walker Buehler. I guess we'll start with Zach Davies before we get to the entree there. That is the one Walker Buehler. Zach Davies, any interest in this dude whatsoever? Because I can't get there.
Dude, I'm so like baffled by the pricing on some of these guys because I have him as like one of the lowest projected and he's expensive. So I mean, the Dodgers, really tough matchup, and their lineup today projected. We don't have a ton of strikeouts, and he's not a good strikeout pitcher. So there's really zero factors in his favor.
Legitimately zero. And the lineup's getting better for the Dodgers. And on the other side of it, not very much win opportunity when you have one Walker Buehler on the mound. I think it's not really even close. I think he's the best arm on this entire slate. The ownership's already there in a meaningful way, but how could it not be? 25.2% K percentage, limits hard contact religiously, 2.98 expected WOBA. I don't really know what to say. Just play Walker Buehler and move on with your day.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say, yeah, he looks like by far the best pitcher. I mean, a huge favorite. He's a very solid arm, not a huge strikeout guy, but the Cubs aren't a bad matchup for strikeouts. The one thing I'll say is that price of 11.5K is really high. And that's kind of making me wonder if the optimal approach today is just to load up on bats instead of pitching. But in most cases, you can find enough value bats to be able to afford one of these pitchers and still like have a stacked lineup. So it does seem like the optimal build is going to be starting with Bueller, punting a pitcher, and going for some of these good stacks.
So I'm looking at a couple books here as well. The under on 7.5 strikeouts in also in the MLB prop tool we just referred to. Highest expected ROI, the under of 7.5, 51% expected ROI. That is probably going to be my go-to bet of the evening, I think, going to the under on that number. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to get completely off the wall. I like this strategy. I think you've referred to it multiple times, and I'll let you expand on it. But bats are how you get different on a slate, and your stack specifically is how you score fantasy points on a slate. It's not always going to be pitching. Those are 2 spots compared to the other 9 spots in your lineup. So is that going to kind of be something like, if I'm trying to build 150 today, like in the mini max or something like that, would Walker Buehler, would you still have some exposure there, like maybe 10-15%? You wouldn't completely write him off, would you?
No, I mean, I think I'm going to have a lot of Walker Buehler, because it's just hard, like in general, to spend all your money without getting a pitcher that's kind of priced up, and he's the best one. So at least on DraftKings, I think he is a very good play, if not the best play. It's just that today is kind of a weird slate where all of the pitchers are kind of grading out as negative values. So if you really like your lineup and you have 2 cheap pitchers, I think that could be a sneaky strong build.
And then going to the Cubby side of it, are there any guys you might want to be wanting off? I mean, 3.8, it's lowest on the slate here as I'm looking at it. It's not probably a spot to go to anybody. Patrick Wisdom only hits home runs, though. So that's something to know. I like guys who hit home runs in my lineup. But up against Walker Buehler, limits against righties, I can't probably get to any bat on this team.
Yeah, I think it's fine to just fade them. The park factor is very negative in LA, even though the temperature is 72. Just a good pitcher's park. The top 6 for the Cubs look like they could be pretty good today. But I don't know if that's enough to overcome the bad park and matchup.
I'll probably have a Jock one-off or two. I won't lie to you. Revenge
Nice.
narrative. Let's go revenge
man,
narrative
I forgot
time.
about that. Hold on, rewind. Let's go get in on some revenge Jock Peterson.
Honestly, I'm here for the hot takes. That's me. Just, yeah, I was gonna say Loco's losing his mind. People think I'm the chalk master in MLB. I'm the opposite of the chalk master. I'm the anti-chalk master in MLB. I am the chalk master in NBA because I don't know, play the best plays in the NBA. The highest projected. Awesemo's tools help you figure out who to go to, who to play with the boom bust tool, and I just do things according to that and win money. So I would recommend doing the same thing for NBA for yourself. Finishing it out, the Dodgers, pretty high implied total. Now I can't talk anymore. We're looking at Muncy back, Bellinger back. We've got Matt Beatty, who has been phenomenal in AAA, hasn't necessarily shown up constantly here at the major league level. I guess you could say the same thing about Gavin Lux, who, considering he was AAA Player of the Year multiple times, I believe, a guy that I would expect to start hitting here. But lots of lefties going up against Zach Davies. What's your interest level in these Dodgers bats?
It's mild, I would say. The park just is the big negative, and they're expensive. But it looks like you can get some of these guys at very low ownership. So it actually looks like they're kind of popular on FanDuel compared to DraftKings. Man, every day, like the Dodgers, they are probably one of the best lineups in baseball. So it makes sense that they'd be expensive, but it's like one of the worst park factors. So they really do pale in comparison to some of the other stacks today.
All right. Well, we've now reached that point. We've got a minute left. You got to give me some home runs. You got to tell me a home run guy. And how about this? Let's get a little different here too. I liked that Loco yesterday, our guy News got in the chat. He brought up FanDuel cash game arms. I want to ask you, if you were building a DraftKings lineup, if you were building one DraftKings lineup tonight, which 2 pitchers are you using for that single entry lineup?
Oh man, this is tough because I feel like it would be Walker Buehler. I'm talking single entry GPP just to clarify, because in cash I might go for 2 expensive pitchers. And I feel really iffy
See,
on
I'm doing this for myself. This is selfish. This is simply I get to ask the number one player in the world exactly what he would do with my money here in this spot. So that works out well for me.
Yeah. I honestly like I think going to Anthony K or JC Mejia like kind of makes sense. But if that's too risky for you, then Carlos Martinez.
Oh, that makes me feel better, Alex. Yes, Carlos Martinez.
Yeah, so like he's actually a favorite in the game and versus a team that sucks. The other two are in bad spots, but they have a little bit of upside. So if you're feeling risky, I'd say Mejia or K. If you're feeling like you want to play safe, Carlos Martinez. Who are you on?
Yeah, I was going to say Carlos Martinez was the guy in this lineup with Walker Buehler. So I'm probably going to be sticking with that. That'll win me all the money now tonight. And plus, again, I got the stamp of approval on Carlos Martinez, which freaks me out a little bit. I really don't know what is up or down anymore. Home run call on the way out here. I'm going to go with, let's get a little bit different. So against that pitcher, if I'm not going to be playing Carlos Martinez, I think Brian Hayes is going to be a really good Major League Baseball hitter long term. Just sign me up for all the Brian Hayes long term. He's on my year-long team, my dynasty team that I have going. And oh man, I hope he ends up being a real good back because I think the potential's there.
I will go with kind of a contrarian pick. The energy in Detroit is off the charts now that we got the number one draft pick in the NBA. And one guy that's been out of nowhere hitting for huge power this year is Eric Haas, the catcher. He has 8 home runs over 120 plate appearances. So that's a rate that will rival like Mike Trout or like Acuna, 1 in every 15 at bats. So I don't think he'll be able to sustain that pace, but it looks like he might have some pretty good power.
Eric Haas with the Cade Cunningham energy. I'm here for it. Congratulations, sir. You deserve good things in Detroit. That's something. It's a nice city. But MLB Live Before Lock coming up here with Spags and Greg right after us. Hopefully they don't mind that we went 2 minutes over. I don't know how. It was only 8 games, but this is an absolute blast. NBA Live Before Lock. Let's throw that in there too. Josh and Rinpack starting up at it's 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 o'clock out here on the West Coast. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell on the way out. He's Alex. He's the number one player in the world. I'm Eric. I'm okay at this. We'll see you guys later.
What is up, guys? It is time for a little MLB Live Before Lock. We'll take you through the top pitchers, the top stacks, and we'll do a little money time in between. And I am frankly livid at Eric and Alex for going long there. I mean, boy, that extra 5 minutes, we would have had so many great takes. Unfortunately, we'll see if we can get to them here. But I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by a man you know and love. He's nerd-ass Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, we've got a baseball slate, which we've already talked about, and I have, moderately different takes from this morning, only because, we have some updated ownership. But yeah, a lot of the teams that I think are in good spots are still in good spots, and some of the spots that are over-owned are still kind of over-owned.
Yeah, I promised we'd have more nuanced takes after Greg and I did the strategy show together this morning, and I'm not sure there's more nuance, so I think there is some more clarity on the guys we're going to have to go to, so we'll cover that all here for you guys. But first of all, make sure you hit that like button. Looks like we got about 530 people in here, only 77 likes, and to me, this feels like we should be at probably 125. Feels like a good mark to hit for the like button, so help us out. Hit that like button. It does help us in a really organic, genuine way where we're trying to stay above the algorithms on YouTube, stay ahead of all the people out there doing similar content. So show us a little love, hit that like button, and of course subscribe to the channel to check out all the content we have going all day long. And also make sure you're playing over at Jock Market, because they are changing the game in fantasy sports where if you're tired of playing on DraftKings and FanDuel, or if you just want to supplement what you're watching during the games themselves, go play over at Jock Market, because they've turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange where you can buy and sell shares of players in real time, really throughout all the innings of a game. Just see what you're watching. If a guy you like is having a tough day at the plate to start it off, go buy some shares of him after that. But go make some IPO picks over at Jock Market right now. They have games for the NBA, MLB, NHL, and PGA, and you can make real money every hour, every minute, every second, every inning of any match or game. Use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players and buy, sell, or hold during the game based on your analysis. So download the app to get started and use our exclusive Awesemo promo code now of Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. It is an exclusive offer only for the Awesemo community, so go check it out. Use that promo code Awesemo over at Jock Market for a $50 deposit match for yourselves over there. And if you want to get the Awesemo Plus data for everything else on the slate, make sure to go to awesemo.com/join and use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock. They'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. And again, there's a lot of options or packages on there. You can also get a baseball one for just $15.95. Go ahead, check them all out at awesemo.com/join and use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock. So Greg, I guess for the people, to reward the viewers who watched this morning, are there any takes you have that we hit on this morning that have changed for you in any sort of way relative to the pitchers that we're going to talk about in this first half of the show?
I don't really remember exactly all my takes, but I feel like they're probably about the same, because I'm about the same amount of opinionated on a lot of these guys. One thing that's still surprising me, Carlos Martinez picking up a whole bunch of ownership on DraftKings. I understand why the matchup against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and this is definitely a matchup of a stoppable force versus a movable object. Carlos Martinez has been terrible. The Pirates have one of the worst offense in baseball. Something has to give today. Personally, I'm siding more with the Pirates side than Carlos Martinez himself. Other options to pay up for. I feel pretty similar about a lot of these guys from this morning, actually.
Yeah, so let's start with talking about the guy on the slate who's going to have the most ownership, it looks like, and also a guy who's going to be probably, I guess, what one can account to be the safest pitcher on the slate, Walker Buehler, going against the Cubs, and the Cubs certainly do have some bats of note going against them, but Walker Buehler, in terms of projections, is the leading guy for Awesemo today. He's also the highest priced player on the slate, as you heard Awesemo just talk about at the beginning of the show, or rather right before the show on the deeper dive. And Walker Buehler, Greg, I feel like I was on the fence this morning about, just being there with the field's ownership, or, not being too crazy about it. But I think with the ownership still being around 42.5% on DK, and also, just the salary, the way it works out for some of the bats, I think going to Walker Buehler is a move that I just don't have a lot of opposition to. He's facing a Cubs team that strikes out at a 26% clip on the year against right-hand pitching. Walker Buehler, not a great strikeout guy, which we can normally kind of nickel and dime him on slates where he's going with other studs out there. Guys that have 30% K rates. Walker Buehler is just a 25% K rate guy, but he doesn't give anything up. And the Cubs here are still a low 3.2 implied run total for them. Buehler, to me, maybe you can have somebody who beats him in a GPP format. Maybe there are some ways you can get different at pitcher and try, spike a few more points of upside. But for the people out there who are risk averse, who don't want to get blown up by a pitcher, I feel like Walker Buehler, probably the guy in the slate that comes with not a lot of risk and certainly has the upside of anybody else we're going to have.
Yeah, he's in about half my lineups right now. The other thing too is if you look at Walker Buehler, even if you look at his underlying stats, you might say like, oh, it looks like Walker Buehler's gotten a little lucky this year, because he has a 2.38 ERA and then a 3.57 expected ERA. And while he does have a low 2.30 BABIP, for his career, he's always been a low BABIP guy. So over the last few seasons, this year, it's actually exactly 2.28. Last year was 1.98. The year before 2.90. The year before 2.48. So at a certain point, we say like, yeah, maybe Walker Buehler would have a 2.28 BABIP. That's a little lucky. but it seems like he's always going to be a low BABIP guy. So him maintaining an ERA, in the high 2 range, low 3s, especially pitching the National League in Los Angeles, probably not really all that crazy. And then just you compare him to the other options on the slate, he's by far the best arm talent on the slate. So I have about half my lineups today, and I just don't see a way around it. He's much better than all the other options.
The top pitcher still is going to be free today on the site. So if you want to take a look for that, I'll actually do the thing I usually do and drop a link in the chat so you guys can check that out for yourself as we talk through it. But it is going to give a pretty good case here to go to Walker Buehler today. He is going to have a 35% chance of being a top pitcher, 42.8% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, looks like he'll have a 15% chance to be the top pitcher along with 32% ownership. And I guess that'd be the follow-up question I have for you, Greg, where I still think, relative to FanDuel, the price tag's there. Buehler's in kind of a price tier of his own. Is it the same equation for you? Because I think he's still the safest play, but I do feel like you can make the case a little bit more for FanDuel to go to a Barrios, to go to a Luis Garcia, to even go all the way down to a Joe Ross. But I feel like that is more of the FanDuel way that it goes there with only one pitcher. So are you going more with Buehler, or are you willing to try some of these other guys in that slot?
Yeah, so overall, my favorite pitcher is still Walker Buehler. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, he's the guy who does have the top overall odds of being a top pitcher. The other thing, too, is it's generally just not that difficult to pay up for pitching on FanDuel. The pricing's pretty favorable. So no issues with Walker Buehler. He's definitely a guy to pay up for. If you're going cheaper, Joe Ross is at least more viable on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. And then same goes for Nick Pivetta, just because on DraftKings, Pivetta's priced all the way up to 9,500. He's 7,800 on FanDuel. Also has pretty good odds of picking up the win today, with the Red Sox being a decent size favorite. But yeah, overall, still Walker Buehler is my favorite pitching option. And then if you're going cheap, Joe Ross, Nick Pivetta. And if you need somebody who's, salary saving option, or not salary saving, but on the high end, but a little cheaper than Buehler, I don't mind going to Barrios. But beyond those 4 pitchers, there's not really somebody I would strongly consider.
And then also our boy El Negro Loco, the news god, of course, does run all of our news alerts on the premium Slack. That's part of that Awesemo Plus membership. Even some of the express, or I guess all the express packages that premium Slack's included. So go check out his work and what he's doing to make sure that everybody's keeping up on the lineup news in both the NBA and MLB out there. But he's asking cash game pitcher Buehler or Pivetta. I think it's probably still Buehler just based on the ownership on FanDuel, Greg. But would you agree that Buehler's the cash game play as well?
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of security with Buehler. And then, like you said, also, if you're in between 2 guys and you're unsure, just let the ownership dictate where you want to go. Pivetta right now project for 16% ownership, whereas Walker Buehler's project for 29%. So then you start to figure in cash games, what's the ownership going to be? And Walker Buehler's probably going to be in the neighborhood of like 50 to 60% owned in cash games on FanDuel. And so that alone, just to block out most of the field, you want to go with Buehler there. That, and also if you look at his box scores for the season, even if he's maybe been a little bit disappointing from just an upside and strikeout perspective, still look at his numbers overall for the year, and he's had very few bad starts. He brings a lot of security. So from FanDuel scoring, his last handful of starts, 59, 43, 37, 43, 28, 43, 52, 40. There's just very few bad games in there. And you like to lock in that kind of, or at least I like to lock in that kind of floor.
Hey, I do too, Greg. How dare you just take all that for yourself? But no, I would agree. I think the floor, the ceiling is there for Buehler, and that to me is the main case here. He's not going to kill you, and you're going to be with a lot of the field anyway. So especially for cash, that's certainly the approach you'd want to have. But for FanDuel, I think on tournaments, I'm probably willing to take a few more stabs away from Buehler, but it'd be hard to not be with the field there. And on DraftKings, I'm with Greg that I think having him in half your lineup seems like about the right move, and I wouldn't even hate getting up to 60% today relative to the slate. Also worth pointing out, we just got the Dodgers lineup. I'm seeing some people also talk about the Braves, but we'll talk about the top stacks in the back half of the show. But Mookie Betts back in the lineup today for the Dodgers. So that's just one news item that's worth pointing out. Betts, Muncy, Taylor, Bellinger, Pujols, Pollock, Lux, Barnes, Buehler. That's the lineup today for the Dodgers that just came in. And we have not gotten a confirmed Braves lineup, but it has been confirmed that Acuna is going to be out. So we'll see what that is. But I'm not sure. Do you know what they're waiting for at this point? I feel like there's one more questionable guy they had, but I'm still not quite sure why they haven't confirmed their lineup yet.
I think it was just Acuna in terms of guys who were questionable. He does have a back injury. He was scratched from yesterday's game with back stiffness, and he's not in the lineup now, but I assume they were just waiting on Acuna. I'm just going to scan the lineup really quick, see if there's anybody else they're waiting on. I would assume we have to get the lineup relatively soon. The game starts in 40 minutes or 50 minutes, but the big one there, no Acuna. So I actually have to rerun my lineups and take him out of my player pool because I had him in about 12% of my lineups or so. But you know who else is hurt is
Heredia, right?
Is Heredia, and he would be somebody who would potentially start in place of Acuna.
Yeah, so right now there are some projected lineups out there, but that haven't been confirmed yet. So we'll keep an eye on it. When that one does get confirmed, we'll talk about it on the back half of the show. And we're talking about the top stacks. Let's talk about the rest of the pitching. And I guess we should discuss the one pivot point at, relative to the salary price tag on DraftKings at pitcher. Jose Barrios is going to be the guy that you could spend up some money and get to as well. And the issue for me, Greg, is that the matchup just not quite as good. A 22.8% K rate on the year for Cleveland compared to a 26% K rate for the Cubs that we just talked about there for going against Buehler. And Barrios, the strikeout rate pretty much right in line with where Buehler is, a 25.7% K rate, 3.5 xFIP. I have no issue with Barrios, and I do think he's a tournament play that you could certainly justify the 29% ownership going his way, though Top Pitcher Stool does have them being a little bit under-owned. I think actually the ownership updates might have changed around here, and we will do money time in 15 minutes to give you guys the top 5 plays or top 5 projected owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel. But Barrios, are you viewing him as a real pivot to Buehler, or is it just more like, hey, if he gets to certain price points where you want to get to the stacks and you want to get to these ones that you can't get to with Buehler in the lineup? I think that, to me, that's the main utility to Barrios, but are you viewing him as like a real pivot to Buehler and just how you're approaching lineups today?
Yeah, so we do have a recent ownership update, and we currently have Barrios only projected to pick up 18% ownership, while he has a 28% chance of being one of the top 2 scoring pitchers of the day. So with that in mind, I actually really like Jose Barrios a lot on DraftKings. He's in play also on FanDuel, like I said before, but more so on DraftKings, where we have to roster 2 pitchers. And, you look at some of these other high-end guys that we have to choose from today. Luis Garcia, he's projected for 40% ownership. Walker Buehler projected for 43% ownership. The only guy in this range who really looks, really under-owned is Jose Barrios. So, with that in mind, he is one of my favorite tournament plays on the slate.
Yeah, Barrios, as Greg just mentioned, 18% expected ownership along with a 28% chance to be a top pitcher. So now he does look under-owned. And I guess that's one way, if you are somebody trying to get a little bit less Walker Buehler, you can certainly pivot there. And it seems like the field won't be there quite as much. And it is a spot that doesn't quite jump out as well on paper for Cleveland, who doesn't strike out too much, as we mentioned. But still a situation where I think Barrios is going to be the most alive pivot to Buehler just relative to the price point and still getting kind of a similar line of construction overall. Let's talk about Luis Garcia, because he's another guy that, to me, I think I was into him this morning when we talked about him, but I think to me, he stands out a little bit more, where I think the chalk construction today on DraftKings will be that Buehler Luis Garcia combination. And that's certainly going to put you in a very similar look to a lot of people out there, but 40% ownership is starting to get to a number here where it does feel like he's significantly over leveraged, has a 30% chance to be one of the top 2 pitchers according to that Top Pitcher Stool today, but 40% expected ownership. And I don't hate it. I still think I might come in a little under the field just, for the risk profile reasons, but going against Detroit, who has almost a 27% K rate on the year, 26.5% against right-hand pitching, Garcia's been good, and he's been good enough, I think, to get it done. And you account for the park shift as well, which is a little bit of a downgrade, but it's still Detroit. And I just think there's enough strikeouts here, Greg, where I don't mind the ownership going to Garcia.
Yeah, this is a spot where I'm just eating the chalk. So Luis Garcia, he has scored at least 22 DraftKings points in 5 of his last 6 starts. 8,700 price tag. I do like the little bit of salary savings that he offers compared to somebody like Walker Buehler and Jose Barrios. So, there's just so few viable pitchers on the slate, too. I compare Luis Garcia most to what we saw with Robbie Ray last night, where I just kind of look at the ownership. It's like, all right, I don't feel like Luis Garcia should be 40% owned, but that's just like a gut feeling. You look at it, you look at the data, and you're just like, I don't want to play this guy 40%. And then no matter how much you run lineups, try to tweak things, just be like, I keep getting a lot of them. And then it's just like, what else do I want to do, right? Do I want to force myself to a bunch of Nick Pivetta at 9,500 on DraftKings or Joe Ross at 9,600? And the answer is no. So, Luis Garcia, it's different on FanDuel, where he's priced up to 9,600, but at 8,700 on DraftKings, we have to roster 2 pitchers, a lot like Robbie Ray. I just feel like it's a necessary play.
And let's talk about Nick Pivetta here, because he does have a pretty good strikeout rate on the year. As we talked about in some previous shows, 27% K rate, some market improvement for him compared to the 23.7% K rate that he's had overall since 2019. The numbers for him, the main number you're going to look at is him going against Tampa Bay, who strikes out at a 26.2% clip against right-hand pitching. Though if Wander Franco is as good as the profile could be, maybe that does drive that down a little bit over the course of time. But Pivetta, I really don't mind overall, or I guess I don't mind conceptually, but when you factor in the $9,500 price tag, like it's a park upgrade, but still Pivetta, I think, comes with a little bit of risk. The ownership's come down enough, though, Greg, where, maybe there is some logic in taking a little more Pivetta. 16.5% ownership compared to a 22% chance to be a top pitcher. And this morning, I think I was very much on the same page with you, where if Pivetta was a chalkier play like we had him initially, I think it makes him tough to get there. But if he's going to be like a borderline tournament option, like I do think he's live as a tournament option, just because Tampa Bay has given up strikeouts and Pivetta's been getting them, even though I'm expecting him to regress at any minute. Just might not be the spot.
Yeah, I'm not getting to very much Pavetta. Just he's really expensive on DraftKings. And the other issue also is just he doesn't work deep into games. He strikes out a lot of hitters, but he also walks a lot of guys. So his strikeout rate this year, like you mentioned, 27%, but he's also walking a career high 11.3% of hitters. So as a result, he hasn't gone more than 6 innings in any start the entire season. And that's always a little bit of a concern for upside for me. That and also, his strikeout rate is so out of line with what it's been the last couple of years, like you said, that it seems like it's due for regression because 2019, 21.1% K rate. And by the way, that was pitching in the National League where he faced pitchers last year, 23.9% K rate. So, it's just so out of the ordinary of what we've seen from him. And he has had, a slight uptick in fastball velocity this year compared to last year. But I do think that he's going to have to see some of these strikeouts come down just because it's so out of whack with what we've seen. So I feel like this is a peak price for Nick, but I would be stunned if he's ever more expensive than this season.
Yeah, definitely. Some guys are going to be priced up, and we'll talk about one more of them in a second who's shockingly priced up, as we talked about this morning on the strategy show. But yeah, Pavetta, I agree. Like he's due to regress. And as Greg pointed out, swing strike rate number is really not up that much, even though velocity is up 0.3 miles per hour. Swing and strike rate at 10.7%, right where it's been with a 10.3% number he's had since 2019. 28% chase rate, actually down a little bit from the 29% he's had since 2019. So at some point, the bottom is going to give out with Pavetta. And I do think that, especially with the weather heating up, as we talk about some pitchers, I'm with you that that's going to happen. I'm willing to take a little more stabs just because the ownership has come down. Like I think we had him around 25 or 30% this morning. So to me, if it's going to be 16.5, I think I could get above it a little bit though. Now at the highest confidence level, especially given that Tampa Bay does have 4.7 implied runs going in their favor. Talk to me about Joe Ross, because we debated him before. We actually debated him earlier in the season too, where it looked like there might be some signs of life. And he is a guy that I guess the ownership has sort of leveled out at 15% as well. But I wouldn't mind getting to the 20.7% chance of him being a top pitcher as my ownership exposure number, because the matchup should be about as good as you're going to find on the slate. Going against Miami, we know has been a profitable spot recently. Obviously, guys like Ross Stripling this week, luminaries like Ross Stripling and also Robbie Ray have gotten there. And Joe Ross has been good enough where, to me, like Pavetta, I think the ownership coming down kind of puts him in the same tier where I could take the flyers on these guys as tournament options if I'm sort of, capping it the right way and getting to X amount of Walker Buehler, X amount of Jose Barrios. But Joe Ross, I hate the price tag, but as a tournament option going against Miami, I feel like he's live to do something here. And I know the strikeout numbers aren't great, 22.5% on the year, but did you sort of land on any more Joe Ross? Because the projection's not great, but I think as a pure tournament play, I wouldn't mind getting to 20% just based on the profile. And the fact too, that I'm kind of surprised to think that he could even get to 15% actual ownership.
Yeah, I'm not getting to very much Joe Ross either. It's such a price issue on DraftKings for me. FanDuel, I do think he's worth a small amount of exposure to just because he's so much cheaper. Where, FanDuel, he is 7,400 and probably fairly likely to pick up a win, at least relative to baseball. Nobody's like ever a minus 500 favorite or anything like that. But in terms of baseball, he's fairly likely to pick up a win, and 7,400. So at that kind of price point, if you get a win and a quality start out of Joe Ross, especially with the other pitchers on the slate not being all that great, there's a good chance that he ends up in an optimal lineup. But on DraftKings at 9,600, it's so hard for me to see a path for him to actually do that. He did have one really big start like a week ago. It was start actually against the Giants. He pitched 8 shutout innings, struck out 9 hitters, scored 37 DraftKings points. But that's the only time he scored over 20 fantasy points. Only the second time he scored over 20 fantasy points the entire season. So at this kind of price tag, we have a guy in Joe Ross who scored over 20 fantasy points twice the entire season. This is an easy matchup, but the odds of him doing it again are not all that high. So, he's a fairly high floor pitcher, but even that, it's not like a guy who is very likely in his good starts because of the lack of strikeouts to even be somebody who's going to score 17 or 18 fantasy points. He's somebody I feel pretty confident in to score, like 12 or 13, but he's $2,000 too expensive.
Okay, I could see it. And I think, the one thing that jumps out, though, these numbers really aren't improved for Joe Ross, but it always feels like historically he should be a better strikeout guy with an 11% swing strike rate, 32% chase rate, but he's only been a 21% K rate guy since 2019. And again, this year only at 22.5%, but I think he can claw up a little bit more today. So that's where I'm at. It's worth pointing out, though, if you are like me and wanting to play a little bit of Joe Ross, you can hedge with taking the under on a strikeout prop today. OddsShopper has it at under 5.5 as a 65% chance of winning today. So not the biggest ROI, play because it is juiced a little bit the other way, but a 15% ROI on that one. So keep that in mind. I think that's something I don't mind doing for some of these risky pitchers as well, just to sort of hedge on what you're doing if you are getting risky with a guy like Joe Ross. But I find it hard to believe he kills you. And I think at the price point, there is a pathway here, just given Buehler's not a blowaway strikeout guy too. I think there's some way for Ross to get into that range and maybe be useful if he opens up the bats for you. Any value pitchers you're taking a stab at? Because I feel like we do have to talk at some length about Anthony Kay here, as the field's going to be on him a good amount. Seems like that ownership number is leveled out close to 30% on DraftKings. We'll do money time coming up in 5 minutes. So we'll reveal the top 5 plays here on DraftKings and FanDuel and their expected ownerships. But Anthony Kay, are you getting there? Because we talked about him this morning and it seemed like an iffy spot. The pitch counts from him have been kind of all over the place, where he was at 40 last time out, has shown much higher pitch counts in the past. Are you willing to get there today against Baltimore?
Yeah, so I am, but not quite as much as the field. So the build I have right now, I have 19% Anthony Kay. And then on the flip side, I'm actually stacking Baltimore a decent amount just for leverage purposes, because there's so much ownership going to Anthony Kay. And, while I don't think he's terrible or anything, he should be priced more than 4,000. Like 4,000 for a pitcher who isn't a total dumpster fire, that's almost always going to look, fairly good from a DraftKings perspective, just because if Anthony Kay makes it through 5 innings and gives up 3 runs, there's a pretty good chance that he's worthwhile at the 4,000 price tag. But the field is there so heavy that it's hard for me to be over the top of that 28% number. So I have him at 19% right now. And like I said, I'm going to be stacking the Orioles a decent amount for leverage on the other side. Also, I'll be refreshing the ownership to see if that changes at all, because we've seen his ownership fluctuate a little bit, where earlier in the day, he was, over 30% owned. And then there was a point a little before the show started where we had like 16% projected ownership going to Anthony Kay. And I thought, well, at 16%, I didn't mind that as a play. But now that he's all the way up to being in nearly a third of the field's lineups, that's a little bit too rich for me to be over the top of the field.
Also, the Twins lineup just came out. If you are somebody out there updating things, Josh Donaldson is going to be in, as our pal Eric Lindquist points out in the YouTube chat. And also Ben Rortvet is the one making the lineup that I don't think was in projected one. So make your updates here. And again, we'll talk about stacks in the back half of the show. The Anthony Kay ownership, I'm with you. I feel like it wouldn't shock me if it got higher than it is, and it would shock me if it were lower and people just don't buy in. And I think that does come with some question marks. And to me, I feel like if you got 20% Anthony Kay, I feel like that's more than enough. He does have a 39% chance to be one of the top 2 value pitchers, and that's really the main utility here. And I guess the question would be too, Greg, if you are getting Anthony Kay, are there any particular stacks that you find like is the logical reason to get him that you're paying up for a little bit more?
Yeah, so a team like the Dodgers, their lineup just came out. We do have the Dodgers being under-owned on the slate. It just in terms of top stack compared to odds of top stack compared to their ownership share. But the thing with the Dodgers, they are so expensive. We talked about this a little bit before earlier, where the Dodgers, we just look at the top stack, so it does look like a good spot because they are going really under-owned. But the reason is because of the prices here. We have Mookie Betts, 5,700, Max Muncy, 5,500, Chris Taylor, 5,600. So there's a whole lot of expensive bats here. It's hard to get all of those guys in the lineup unless you're saving somewhere at pitcher. And that's where Anthony Kay makes the most sense.
Also, I guess Josh Bell got scratched from the Nationals lineup, as our boy News God points out in the premium Slack. So keep that in mind here if you were getting a lot of Josh Bell. It looks like Ryan Zimmerman's going to be replacing him in the lineup. So I will paste that in here and we'll talk about that more coming up. We got one super chat here from Soul Dope asking who would be your top 2 pitchers on FanDuel, excluding for GPPs, excluding Walker Buehler. And I think actually, if you have them top of your head, Greg, I'll give it to you. But I think Joe Ross would be one of mine. So I'll throw it to you for the other 2.
So it is, that would be, am I not allowed to pick Joe Ross now?
Well, I guess you can. If he's one of yours too, then there'll be overlap. I just thought you wouldn't like Joe Ross. I don't know. You're really bashing Joe Ross after being his biggest fan earlier in the year.
Yeah, no, it's 7,400 on FanDuel. I think it's a different story than him being at 9,600 on DraftKings. But yeah, so Joe Ross at 7,400 and then Jose Barrios at 9,000.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable duo. To me, actually, yeah, I guess I would have the same too. I don't mind Pivetta on FanDuel. I mean, I don't mind him on DraftKings either, but I think Pivetta 7,800 price tag. I wouldn't mind trying to hoping that you could ride for one more day with him before things do start to get worse as the weather heats up. But I think Ross and Pivetta would be mine, but I think Greg's are fine as well. So there we go. There's he got 5 pitchers. That's like, wow, what a discount for Soul Dope for a $2 super chat.
Yeah, exactly what he wanted. He wanted everybody. Should we just list all the rest of the names too?
And Butthole Jenkins saying Greg and Spags the best duo since Misty May Trainer and Kerry Walsh Jennings, which I feel that's a compliment, I would say, but I don't think we're as visually appealing. I'll just say that right from the jump.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. I think that we are actually more visually appealing, although beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But hey, listen, dynamic volleyball duo from the time that I was like 12 years old or something. I feel like they retired a very long time ago.
There were a lot of horny teens, I believe, who became adults watching those beach volleyball games. We got an ownership update here, so we'll do money time. But first, Greg, anybody else a pitcher that you just want to give a cosign to or a mention to, just so we didn't leave them completely ignored? Because I know the deeper dive guys that Alex and Eric were debating Carlos Martinez a lot, and I am just not there in the way that I think they were. But if you have any feelings about him or anybody else, feel free to throw them in now.
I mean, I mentioned at the top, I don't know what their takes were, but I have 2% Carlos Martinez right now, and I'm fairly high on the Pirates. Listen, something's going to give here. The Pirates offense absolutely stinks. Carlos Martinez also absolutely stinks. I am siding with the Pirates offense just because I do think it makes a lot of sense to fit them in with the pitchers I like, right? So being able to roster a Pirate stack means that I could pair Walker Buehler, Jose Barrios, and Luis Garcia, those three in any of those lineups. Beyond them, there's no real standout pitching options. Like, the reason Anthony Kay is popular today is not just because he's cheap. That is part of it. The other reason also is because the pitching options suck. So there's a realistic path where Anthony Kay scores 10 fantasy points and winds up in the optimal lineup just because none of the other guys in the price range that he's at do anything of note. So, that's also one of the reasons people are getting to Carlos Martinez. He's cheap at 6,200 and a favorable matchup. But this is a spot for me personally that I like to be on the other side of. When there is a cheap pitcher that's really chalky that I also don't think is any good, I like to stack against them.
And Pittsburgh on the year is certainly not really good either. We'll talk about them in the stacks portion of the show. Only a 123 ISO against right-hand pitching, but they do have guys in the mix. And I'm with you. I think going to Brian Hayes, we talked about this morning, and I know we talked about in the deeper dive as well. Brian Reynolds, Colin Moran, Polanco. These are all guys who can put the bat on the ball and have pretty good barreled ball rates. And Martinez, it's also an 84-degree day, 70% humidity, so the weather is going to be benefiting the bats a little bit more. Pittsburgh certainly not the prize pig by any stretch, but neither is Carlos Martinez. So I'm with you. I think that's a lot of ownership going to a guy that I just don't have a ton of faith in at all. But let's do the ownership here, and we'll do money time. And real fast, I'm just going to point out, it's going to be the second to last money time for me for a while here. I'll be doing 2 shows tomorrow, and then I'm taking a little hiatus going through the summer, I guess, not doing Awesemo shows. So we have to cherish these moments together, guys. So hit that like button if you can. This will be my last show with Greg, and I'm sure, Greg, known for your emotions, you must be shedding tears inside, if not outwardly.
It's a tough time for me because listen, we do a lot of shows together, and the reality is you're very good at hosting the shows. You make it easy for me where we just sit here, we have a conversation, right? It never feels like work. We sit here, we talk about baseball, we talk about basketball, and I do consider you a friend, Spag. So this is a sad moment for me.
Yeah, I might be back for NFL season. We'll see how it goes. I'm taking my free agency period, much like the basketball players who would normally be doing around this time, and then they couldn't line up with me this year. Those lazy, I guess I should call them lazy. There's probably some bad connotations to that one, but either way, yeah, I'll be taking some time. So enjoy these last 2 days with me. I'm not making a big deal of it. There'll be no farewell show this time because there's a decent chance I'll be back for the NFL season, but we'll see how it goes here. So let's cherish our moments together, as I do with my pal Greg as well, who I also consider a friend, so you don't feel completely vulnerable. You know who would hate that? Is it Eric would hate that if you were like, I consider you a friend, and I'm just like, cool, thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I would be like, oh, really? I only seen you on the internet. Like, we don't hang out or anything. He did mention that he would have invited me to his bachelor party, except that he thought that it's far away from me. He knows that I have some I don't drink, I have some medical stuff, so he thought that he didn't want to put me in that situation. I said, you don't have to worry about it. I would have said no. I didn't want to go.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get to that point because I think he would have known my response too. But yeah, no, I'm sure we missed out on a lot of fun. Did seem like Rinpack did a good job on his Instagram stories, making that look like a good time. So I'm sure it'll be fun. But yeah, no, have no fear for me. Follow me at Chris Spags if you want to see what I'm doing next. And I'm sure I'll always be in the ecosystem here, so have no fear about that. But let's do the ownership game and the money time, of course, as you guys all love. So hit that like button if you can. Top 5 projected owned plays on DraftKings. Number 1 expected owned player is going to be Walker Buehler, now up to 45.2%. Number 2, Luis Garcia, 38%. Number 3, Anthony Kay, now at 24.4%. He's the fluctuations of Anthony Kay, much like the stock market. Joe Ross up to 20%. So my argument's there. I guess I would be with the field on Joe Ross. Number 5, Kyle Tucker at 20% as well. We'll save that for talking about bats. On FanDuel, the top 5, number 1, Marcus Semien, 32%. Number 2, Walker Buehler at 30%. Number 3, Yordan Alvarez at 28%. Number 4, Teoscar Hernandez also at 28%. And number 5, Freddie Freeman going to be at 27.4%. So There are your top plays. And of course, if you want to get those ownership projections in your life every single day, go to awesemo.com/join and use the promo code MLB live before lock to save 25% off your first week. And Carlos Manzo caping for Eric in the chat saying, fuck your coworkers, Eric. I think sometimes people need to know that the ribbing here is generally going to be mutually amicable and fun amongst friends. We like Eric. I have a puppet of this man I'm going to be looking at whether I'm doing shows here or not.
Yeah, and you touch yourself with it, right? Like you're very intimate with Eric. You're somebody you spend you've also done a lot of shows with him. And yeah, I also listen, I've talked with Eric off of shows. We've had times where we've done shows together, and after it's over, we've sat here for like an hour just talking to each other. So yeah, we all like each other. But listen, would the shows be any fun if we just sat here and agree with each other the entire time?
Yeah, we're like, oh, Eric, you're so great. You're so smart. No, you got to tear him down so we all feel better about ourselves. That's the nature of the beast here. But Atlanta Braves lineup also confirmed now. Dansby Swanson, Freddie Freeman, Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Abraham Almonte, Ahire Adrianza, Kevin Smith, and an Ender Inciarte who upset the home run props yesterday. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, so now I have to. By the way, so the Ender Inciarte thing, because this is something that you and I, maybe like 3 people, picked up on yesterday. But there's a certain sports book yesterday, which one of the great things about using Odd Shoppers, you can compare lines at different books. And there was a book that had an egregious pricing error yesterday, and they had accidentally priced Ender Inciarte at even odds to not hit a home run yesterday. So what I suspect happened is they meant to make the bet minus 1,000. But they left off a 0, so that makes it an even bet. So, minus 100. So then you look at that and just go, oh my God, Ender Inciarte had 1 homer all season. That's got to be one of the best home run prop bets that I've ever seen, especially because as we've seen, and I've talked about, and we really gets highlighted in the top in our props tool, there are not very many home run props that are actually, profitable, good wagers to make. And then all of a sudden you have Ender Inciarte, even odds to not homer. It's like, oh, this guy who is he? Prime Barry Bonds. And then of course he hits a home run.
Yeah, that was that is one of those things here where we do have the prop betting tool here, which honestly is a great feature to have. And Alex was talking about in the last show. So if you did kind of miss that one, I think it's worth hearing him talk about the unders and the importance of being willing to take unders. And taking the home run unders going to look like some of the best bets on the board most days. And that is one time where you really saw the volatility of baseball firsthand, where that was great odds on Inciarte and also a high probability of him to not hit a home run. And then it happens because baseball will always baseball you whenever you least expect it. So keep that in mind when using the props tool. But definitely a lot of people had success with the NBA version of the tool, so make sure to check it out on the site. And I'll drop a link in here. Why not? I'll just keep dropping links to things. But there we go. All right, let's talk about the top stacks, and I'll also refresh the numbers here to see where we should be going. But I feel like either way, we're gonna have to talk about Houston up top. But they are a team that's been certainly much ballyhooed this week, and then much debated on some slates where they had disappointed in one spot, and then for the rest of the spots, for the most part, did come through. Now they're getting a park downgrade going into Detroit, but it is still going to be warm weather out there, and a Houston team who should be able to take advantage of Jose Urena, whether that is for large fantasy plays, for home runs and for doubles and triples and all that, or if it's just them getting a bunch of hits and walks on them. They're going to score runs here, Greg, but where are your exposures landing with the Astros today, given that they have this high total and the field once again expect to be flocking to them en masse?
Yeah, so they actually look fairly reasonable today. They're definitely overowned, but it's not crazy overowned. So I'm going to be a little bit underweight to the field. I'm going to have a bunch of exposure to some of these guys as one-offs, but I've been pretty hard underweight to the field on the Astros the last 3 slates. One time it worked out very well. 2 times it absolutely did not. But with that said, I still think in those spots where a team is that highly owned, long-term, I'm just never going to be rostering a team at quite that kind of ownership. But, for today, we have them with about a 15% ownership share, 14% chance to be a top stack. So I'm updating everything for myself now just because we have the Braves lineup, and Ronald Acuna was somebody who was in about 12% of my lineups, and now I have to rearrange all that. But yet now just looking at the Houston Astros updated ownership and that the Braves new lineup and everything, that did sway stuff a lot. But the Astros, they look like a team to be, somewhere around even with the field on. It's not, I don't view them as poorly as a play as I did the last few slates.
It's worth pointing out that they are a little bit over leveraged on both DraftKings and FanDuel, more so on FanDuel, it looks like, but still plays that aren't going to be as egregious as they've been other days. And I guess the one team we could talk about who maybe does look a little more egregious, and I certainly still like them. I think they were a team that we did key in on and were surprised by the ownership being lower earlier this morning. The Toronto Blue Jays going against Dean Kramer. Dean Kramer, certainly a guy who's had a tough time pitching in the park that he does, gives up a good amount of power, giving up a 230 ISO since last year, 212 ISO to lefties, 246 ISO to righties. righty. So pretty bad marks across the board in terms of power. And this year, giving up a 21-degree launch angle, 12% barrel ball rate, 6% on run rate. It's probably not going to get a lot better playing in the Buffalo Park that should have actually warmer weather than they've had recently, 75-degree weather, not the highest humidity, but still above average. So this spot, Greg, Toronto's ownership has come up. Where are you landing with them? Because I feel like the ownership doesn't seem completely egregious for these guys. I guess Simeon's really the one, especially on FanDuel, you can point to that ownership being a little egregious. But for the rest of the team, like I think on DraftKings, they look fine. And I guess maybe you have a little more apprehension on FanDuel with the ownership numbers there. But how are you feeling about the Blue Jays with the highest implied total on the slate?
Yeah, I have some stack of Toronto, but I have about half the exposure the field has. The real issue is just that if we look at the pitchers that we like on this slate, or is the pitchers I like, because we liked a lot of the same guys, so kind of talking for both of us. But, we didn't really like the cheap pitchers all that much. So then you have to expect that we have to like some cheaper offenses. That is not the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays, we have Semien 5,400, Bo Bichette is 6,000, Vlad Jr. 6,100. So yeah, if you want to stack the Blue Jays and roster the pitchers that I actually like today, you can't do it with the best hitters in the Blue Jays lineup. So the guys that I am getting the most exposure to from Toronto is Reese McGuire at catcher, nearly min price. He's hit the ball really well as of late. So McGuire's fantasy point totals over the last handful of games. He has a game of 17 fantasy points, a game of 26 fantasy points. So I think that him as a cheap catcher, and also it's generally hard to get production out of catcher anyway. So then you get the fact that somebody's actually hitting the ball well as of late. He's nearly min price. And then it's also a favorable matchup. So Reese McGuire is actually the Toronto player I have the most exposure to. Then other than that, guys like Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel, Kevon Biggio, these guys are reasonably priced, but it is really hard for me to get to the really expensive Toronto players.
Yeah, I get it. And I think the price tags here, certainly, I guess the irony would be that you are going to probably get more Anthony Kay in your life if you want to get to Toronto. And then I guess you are sort of correlating those. And I guess that'd be a question for you, Greg, where I think people will view that as being something where, hey, like if I'm stacking Toronto, I'll just take Anthony Kay and then he'll get the win bonus if they go off. Is that something you would consider maybe trying to not do just because of that? To me seems like how a tournament player, the average casual player out there might think about it. And that's something that to me, I think you could knock off a portion of the field if you don't play Kay with your Raptors or your Blue Jays.
So the issue is though, if you're making a Blue Jay stack and you're paying up for the best hitters, you don't really have a choice. Right? Like what else? Because there's a limited amount of salary. It's not like you could throw Walker Buehler and Luis Garcia in there with them. Like you have to go somewhere cheap for pitcher. I don't like Carlos Martinez for this slate. So there's only so many places to go. You're almost forced to play Anthony Kay if you're stacking the best hitters on Toronto.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to look at it. So yeah, definitely something that just occurred to me while looking through it. And I'd be curious to see if you separated those guys away I think you could, I don't know. You still need Toronto to go off. So there are some contingencies involved there, but just something that I was tooling around in my brain with. Talk to me about the Orioles. Cause I always have to ask you about the Orioles no matter what show we're doing, because I do feel like you have had a good read with them and some good vibes with them in a way. Probably a lot of the field has not had when playing Baltimore Orioles, but they've been monsters on the year against left-hand pitching, a 114 WRC plus, or I guess monsters relative to what we expect of Baltimore, but 328 on base percentage, 180 ISO, 21.5% K rate, and Anthony Kay going to have all that ownership going his way. Are you willing to get to the Orioles more than the field? It does seem like the ownership's pretty much flat according to the top stacks tool, though Baltimore does have a decent shot of being a top value stack on the slate.
Just because there's so much ownership going to Anthony Kay, and I think he's kind of an iffy play, that's what really has me on Baltimore. That, and also, we do have Baltimore 9.5% chance of being a top value stack on the slate. So that's not a bad mark. That is the third best mark on the slate behind the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Houston Astros. Also not that much ownership going to the Orioles, 5.4%. So the real reason, though, is just because, the ownership going to Anthony Kay. If we were to get an ownership update and Anthony Kay was only like 10% owned, then I wouldn't be very high on Baltimore. But just because I think Anthony Kay, wide range of outcomes with him. We don't know how deep he's going to the game. We don't know how good he's going to be. But just the fact that the field is playing him in about a third of their lineups, that's enough for me to want to get to an offense with a little bit of power upside in Baltimore.
So let's get to I guess we could talk about all the stacks, but let's get to the stack that I'm most intrigued by because I want to hear your thoughts. Cincinnati, to me, jumps out. Going against Jesse Chavez, will be basically a glorified opener, and he has been good in minor league baseball. Jesse Chavez is one of those guys where I went to his minor league baseball page, and he's been pitching in the minors since like 2002, like just going back and forth between the majors and the minors. This year, though, he's had a 35% K rate, as I think he's the closer in the minors because he had some save numbers, but definitely a guy coming out of the bullpen. So you shouldn't expect him to be in play at all as an option, but big strikeout rate numbers, but But the Atlanta bullpen overall, just not very good. It's also going to be a park downgrade for them going to Cincinnati on a day where there's 78-degree weather, 66% humidity in the air for them as well, and a high total for the Reds. And the Reds ownership, Toronto came up. A lot of these other teams came up. Houston came up from this morning. But Cincinnati now looking significantly underowned on DraftKings. And I know the price tags for some of these guys kind of ugly. You have to pay just shy of $6K for Jesse Winker. Even though he's been good against right-hand pitching, that is still a steep price tag to pay for him. But I like the Reds a lot, and I'm kind of surprised it ended up one of the chalkier stacks. I know we have other teams that have higher probabilities. Where are you landing with Cincinnati today in a spot that they're going against a Braves bullpen for the most part, and that bullpen's given up a 250 batting average, 1.4 whip, 40% fly ball rate, and that's kind of numbers that won't play pretty well in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so with the Cincinnati Reds, I think the main thing that I like here is number one, also like you mentioned, Jesse Chavez now expected to start, and listen, if somebody's 37 years old and they're still pitching in the minor leagues, chances are they're not a lights out pitcher. And that's really what we have here with Jesse Chavez. The other thing also, now that we have an ownership update, the Reds have the most positive leverage stack score on both DraftKings, and let's see if it still is on FanDuel as well. Not on FanDuel. FanDuel, the most positive leverage team is actually the Red Sox now, but on DraftKings, we do have the Reds is the most positive leverage stack. They do also a slightly positively leveraged on FanDuel, but just with that in mind, it's a very high priority team for me to get to. The one concern I have that I did raise this morning is we often see the Reds pinch hit for players during the game. So one guy who I'm trying to not get too much of in my Cincinnati stacks is Tyler Naquin, just because he's somebody that pretty frequently switch out. So in a game that's going to be a bullpen game, there's a pretty good chance that, let's say they hit Jesse Chavez really hard early, maybe Tyler Naquin doesn't get on base in his first at bat. They might bring a lefty in later in the game. And that might be his only at bat of the entire game. So that's the one player I have concerns with. But other than that, they're so positively leveraged. This is a team that's a very high priority for me on DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm with you on that take as well. And yeah, I would agree that Naquin's certainly the one that does jump out as having some platoon risk. And I think that also is kind of reflected in the ownership. It could also be the price tag, but only 3% ownership go Naquin's way. Some of these guys around 5%. But the fact that there really isn't anybody spiking major ownership here surprises me, given the matchup, the park upgrade, the weather, all of that, and going against the Braves bullpen that's not that good. So to me in this spot, Cincinnati, I'm kind of surprised by the ownership. I do think that Toronto, more interesting team on paper, probably the same for Houston as well. But it's a really high total for Cincinnati, and normally that does mean the field's there, and the field's not there. Atlanta too, Greg, I feel like in a good spot. Certainly that lineup is going to be worse with no Acuna in the mix, but you have Dansby Swanson hitting up top, and he's been perfectly fine for a while now. 11.5% barrel ball rate over the last season and change. The top four is really where you're looking here. After that, it does kind of fall off. Like Kevin Smith, you could certainly correlate your catcher there, and that's fine. And he's had some moments, though, I guess, been bad enough for a while now that his numbers are pretty bad. Almonte, the guy I talked about this morning, down in the 5 hole, I feel like he's still in play for me at not much ownership. But where are you landing with the Braves? Because they are also a team with around a 10% chance to be a top stack going against Tony Santillan. And Santillan's been getting hit pretty hard in a very limited sample size so far.
Yeah, so a couple of weird things happened with the Braves just now. So number one, Ronald Acuna officially found out about 30 minutes ago he wasn't going to be in the lineup. And then we got the Braves' actual lineup about 15 minutes ago now. And so a couple of things changed from when that happened. First of all, I have to assume no Ronald Acuna. The Braves are now overall as an offense much more likely to have a big game. But at the same time, they also become slightly more affordable because Ronald Acuna was $6,000 on DraftKings, also one of the most expensive hitters on FanDuel. And that did become a little problematic in terms of stacking them. So overall, I do have less Atlanta stacks than I had when we first started the show. But it's still a team that I'm slightly overweight to the field on just because they are a little bit easier to fit into lineups. And the ownership of them went way down as a team when Acuna was no longer in the lineup.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note because I think taking Acuna out of the lineup, the field probably won't get there. And just like there's certainly not a lot of desire to get to Adrianza or Smith or Enciarte, despite obviously that blazing bat that he had yesterday. So yeah, to me, I think, going to 5-man would be appealing. I do like Cincinnati more, and the run total also does support liking Cincinnati more, though the Braves look like they'll be slightly higher owned for guys like Freeman, Albies, Austin Riley. But yeah, I am intrigued by this game overall. I think the game environment does seem like the best one on the slate to me in terms of the weather and the park factors. So if people are going to sleep on it, I think I'd be willing to be there a good amount today. Other stacks, Greg, that we could talk about. Are you going to any Minnesota in this spot? Minnesota getting Josh Donaldson back in the mix. They had some questionable guys as well that maybe driving down the ownership a little bit on the stack. Looking over owned according to the top stack tool, and they're going against Giancarlo Mejia, who we talked about this morning on the strategy show, but 6% barrel ball rate, only a 3-degree launch angle, has avoided home runs pretty well. 2.9% home run mark, be a little bit under league average. Minnesota, we know, has the power to get going in any spot, and it is 85-degree weather in Minnesota, so another hot day for them to maybe get some bats going. Are you with the Twins? Are you under on the Twins? How are you approaching them?
Yeah, I am pretty heavily underweight to the Minnesota Twins. We have them as one of the most popular stacks of the day, 10.3% ownership share on DraftKings. That is the third most popular team, only behind the Houston Astros and the Toronto Blue Jays. But the Astros and the Blue Jays both have about double the odds of being the top stack compared to them. And then on FanDuel, a little more reasonably owned, 8.1%, but that's still a little bit over-owned. So at least for DraftKings purposes, this is the team that I'm most underweight to the field on. There's just a whole lot of ownership going here. And I agree with you on Mejia. He's by no means a lights out pitcher, but he's not some sort of total train wreck that, should be getting stacked up at a double digit margin when, there are other teams in this range that I much prefer, like the Toronto Blue Jays and the Houston Astros.
Yeah, so we are on the same page there. Mejia, not a guy you're going to play, though, because he's not pitching deep enough into games, only 2.5 innings per appearance so far. The pitch count, maybe it'll come up at some point, but only around 42.4 so far this year. So more of a guy who can limit damage, and worth pointing out as well, the Cleveland bullpen has some of the best marks on the slate, 3.74 xFIP, 29% K rate, good swing strike rate as well, 13.4%, and a 31% chase rate. So to me, Minnesota, I think there's a lot of things going against them, and I don't mind taking one-offs, but I think the full stack going to be a little bit overowned and probably not the best one to get to, especially with some of the decreases in just quality hitters across the board there. Other stacks we could talk about. You mentioned the Dodgers, and I feel like I'll give you a chance to talk about them because I'm curious if you ended up with a good amount, because they do look a little underowned in the top stacks tool, not the highest probability to be a top stack, but this lineup getting closer to full health to me always gives me some interest, and didn't look quite as good as it might have looked this morning. I think some of the guys who took out at least one quality bat that I'm escaping. My brain is escaping now who it is, but overall going to get Zach Davies, not a bad spot. Certainly a guy that's limited power pretty well. Just a 2% on run rates for him allowed so far this year, 9-degree launch angle, but a 5.3 implied run total for the Dodgers. And we know these quality bats. Are you going there a lot? Because it's certainly a pay to be contrarian spot, it would seem.
I have him in my player pool, but no, not very much. It's just, it's a really good matchup against Zach Davies. He's been pretty miserable so far this year. He's actually, just to reference something in the chat that I've been going back and forth with Griff Punisher in here, is he saying because he is I get so caught up in these things, like whether it be Twitter or anywhere on the internet, but
anybody who disagrees with you vaguely meanly, they're gonna get your wrath.
So he's because he's contending, I guess, that Kyle Hendricks has been good this year, and I disagree. He's been worth 0.1 wins above replacement this year. He does have a 3.84 ERA, 5.13 expected ERA. Zach Davies has been almost the exact same pitcher as Kyle Hendricks for the season. So Zach Davies now, because I was on Zach Davies numbers, and then I had to go to Kyle Hendricks because it's the internet, right? You have to, if you don't argue, then what is your then you have no, you don't hold yourself.
What are your merits as a man would be the question.
Yeah, exactly. It's akin to getting castrated, right? If somebody calls out your honor and says that they disagree with you on a fantasy pitcher, that's it. You have to make your case and go back. But listen, I mean, Zach Davies has been a very similar type pitcher to Kyle Hendricks this year. Zach Davies is a 4.66 ERA, 6.34 expected ERA, 4.63 FIP. Does not generate very many strikeouts. He's walking a lot of guys. That is one difference between him and Hendricks, is that Zach Davies walks a whole bunch more guys than Hendricks, but Hendricks also allows a lot more home runs than Zach Davies does. But still, Davies has been poor enough this year that I think it's a good spot for the Dodgers. Just the issue becomes the top hitters are so expensive for the Dodgers that it is a little hard to get with them with a whole lot of frequency. So I'm a little bit overweight to the field on them, but that's only because they're so low owned. So it's not like they're one of my top stacks or anything.
Yeah, Davey is kind of a low pitch count. A lower pitch count, I think, is one thing so you could point to for Kyle Hendricks, where he's pitching, I think, off the top of my head, I feel like it's like 95 pitches per appearance, and Davey's at 80. But yeah, I agree. Like, Davey's not a guy I would want to roster, especially not at 8,100. The prices on the slate are ridiculous, which I think is why I'm willing to make cases for guys like Nick Pivetta and Joe Ross a little bit more. But 8,100 for Davies, just not a guy you should be getting to. And I think, too, he's kind of like a Brad Keller type where the ball's mostly kept down. He's going to give up some runs, but certainly not a guy that's going to be good by any stretch. And a team like the Dodgers can take advantage, but probably not the highest probability to take advantage. any Cubs for you going against Walker Buehler? We talked about this a little bit this morning, and still no ownership going their way. And that's something I know you've talked about recently, and I think is a pretty good point about, some of these teams where you're trying to get leverage bats going the other way, and you go like, oh, this would be a great idea to go against Robbie Ray or some of these guys. And then the ownership's already there and it doesn't make sense. It's not the case for the Cubs today, where every single guy is about 1%. I guess Wilson Contreras, the only one pushing to 2% expected ownership. So would you get any Cubs for yourself to hedge against a lot of Walker Buehler, given that we talked about how safe he is?
No, I'm rerunning my lineups right now. And at least in the last run I did, I had 0% Cub stacks. And all right, my lineup's almost done running, got 10 more left to build. And once again, 0% Cub stacks. So no, they are not going to be my lineup at all. There's just so many better spots to target. Even if Walker Buehler hasn't been a Cy Young caliber starting pitcher, he's still been a top of the rotation type of guy. The Dodgers have a good bullpen behind him. And we have a slate where there's a lot of bad pitching options. And this is one of the only good pitchers on the slate. So with that in mind, I don't really like stacking the Cubs.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I like intellectually, but I don't necessarily see a ton of merit going to, or a ton of confidence going there rather. But to me, if you're playing 150, I wouldn't hate taking some portion of it just because nobody's going to be there at all on the slate. And we know, the Cubs are a good team. They have a 180 ISO on the year against right-hand pitching. The lineup they have today, I have a 209 ISO against right-hand pitching. So I think they are, we made the case for Buehler. I stand by that case, but I still think just for some share of lineups without Buehler, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of Cubs, even though it's just not going to look that great on paper. One team with over a 5 implied total that we haven't hit on is going to be St. Louis going against Chad Kuhl. And Chad Kuhl, another guy who does mostly just avoid the big damage. And we discussed this morning on the strategy show, but a lot of the batting average things with Chad Kuhl to me just don't make sense. He's a guy giving up a 230 batting average and a 220 batting average in 2019, despite a 5.8 xFIP this year, a 5.3 xFIP since 2019. And he stinks, but I don't know if this Cardinal stack is the move to go to today. And I guess, the walk rate's really high for Kuhl, so you can see guys get on base. But to me, that would push you more towards liking some of the one-offs a little bit more, taking your shots at minimum salary. Lars Nootbaar, who I'm so happy to see this guy in the league and that he's a real human being. But the rest of these guys too, like Tyler O'Neill, 3,400, I think can certainly benefit from guys walking ahead of him. I like the Cardinals more as a one-off situation. I don't know about the full stack, Greg. Are you getting there going against old Chad Kuhl?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, and my issue with stacking against Chad Kuhl and the Cardinals here is that for his career, Kuhl's been fine against right-handed hitters. He really struggles against lefty. He gets lit up by left-handed batters. There just aren't that many lefties to go to in the Cardinals lineup. So, I like Dylan Carlson as a one-off, but I only have a couple of Cardinal stacks, even though it seems like a good spot on paper, just because I would like to take some of the left-handed bats, but the best hitters that the Cardinals have are generally really expensive righties. Paul Goldschmidt is expensive and a right-handed batter. We have Nolan Arenado, super expensive on FanDuel and DraftKings. He's a right-handed batter. So with that in mind, I don't find any individual hitters that I like enough to really want to stack up this team at a considerable margin. So let's see, the latest ownership for the Cardinals. Yeah, so I have about half the amount of ownership to the Cardinals that the field has. The only one individual player I'm really getting to that much is Carlson.
Yeah, so that's a reasonable one. Also, I think Jesse Rodriguez thinks that Nootbaar is a nickname we had, which would be a fun nickname to give to somebody. But no, that is in fact a real human being's name, Lars Nootbaar, a lefty who was on the Cardinals, who's been in their minor league organization for a little bit. And he does sound like a delicious treat, and maybe he will be as a hitter. He does have a 667 ISO so far in 3 at-bats against righties. So we all know how that goes. It's going to hold up over the course of time, I'm sure. Let's see. We had one question here in the premium Slack, which talking about pitching, but Jets World asking DK single entry. Would you go K or Martinez? I feel like I don't like either option, Greg, but if I had to choose, I'd probably go Anthony K. Do you feel any differently?
Yeah, I prefer K. I have Anthony K in, about 20% of my lineups, and I have like 3 Carlos Martinez lineups. So, with that in mind, I don't view them that much differently as pitchers, Anthony K and Carlos Martinez. I mean, Carlos Martinez has been just a replacement level pitcher this year, and at least Anthony K is cheaper. Both of them are cheap, but Carlos Martinez is $6,200 and then we're $6,300. So $2,300 less for Anthony K. So that's really a deciding factor.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And to me, I like, I do like the Pittsburgh leverage a little bit more. And I guess we should talk about that here. We did talk about some of the Pirates bats going against Carlos Martinez, and the weather in the spot worth pointing out here, almost 85 degrees, humid day, over 70% humidity in St. Louis. And I think overall, Martinez, another guy who keeps the ball down. This is a slate chock full of guys who keep the ball down. A 2% home run rate, only a 10-degree launch angle, 8% barrel ball rate, I guess closer to 9%, but still not crazy marks going against Martinez. But Pittsburgh, I think they have enough guys in the mix now that I'm intrigued by them. It's sort of the 5-man stack, I think, might be pushing it a little bit here, Greg, but the mini stack for Pittsburgh, I think, is intriguing, and taking one-offs from here too, I'm also into, especially given the price tags like Brian Reynolds at just around $3K or $3,200 on DraftKings, Colin Moran, $2,500 in the cleanup spot. Like, I think there's some utility here to the Pirates. So give me your take on them one more time.
There is a lot of ownership going to Carlos Martinez. He has not pitched particularly well this season. He's pitched. Listen, Kyle Hendricks is better than Carlos Martinez, as long as we're going to circle back on him, because nobody's been worse than Carlos Martinez this year. You could only be, Matt Harvey's been worse, but in general, you could only be an equal to Carlos Martinez. There is no rung below him. He's a 6.62 ERA, 5.91 expected ERA. Last year, Carlos Martinez, 9.9 ERA, 5.97 expected ERA. The velocity's down a few miles per hour versus peak numbers. So when he first broke into the league, this is a guy who was able to throw 98 miles per hour. Still throws relatively hard at 94.1, but that's nowhere what he used to be. And he just doesn't generate swing and misses anymore. He doesn't miss bats, 15.6% K rate. So, this is a spot where I'm really taking a stand. I feel fairly confident that either Carlos Martinez or the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to produce a good fantasy result today. And I personally prefer the Pittsburgh Pirates because they're not that popular of an offense. Carlos Martinez is very popular as a pitching option.
All right, we got about 8 minutes left to lock, probably 7 by the time you guys hear this. So start getting those lineups in if you can. And make sure to also check out the data that we have at awesemo.com/join. That promo code MLB live before lock. All the data gets updated as well for the night slates. Now every slate we have covered for both the top pitchers tool as well as the top stacks tool. So go check that out. And again, use that promo code MLB live before lock to save 25% off your first week. Any stacks we haven't hit on that you view as a priority? Like, I'm intrigued by Washington generally, but the park downgrade there, roof closed day in Miami, to me, not the most appealing situation overall. And we talked about the Orioles. I feel like we've covered most of the core stacks that I find important. And honestly, we might have covered pretty much any team, but any wrinkles here that you're finding surprising in your final exposures, Greg?
I feel like we've talked about every single team at this point.
Cleveland we haven't talked about, but Barrios, to me, not the guy to go against.
No, I have no real significant exposure to the Cleveland Indians. If people have questions, definitely fire those into the YouTube chat, put them in the premium Slack chat. We can start answering them. But let's see, individual hitters. Let me see if there's anybody that I'm getting a lot of. So my most rostered hitter right now is actually Reese McGuire at catcher. Whenever there's a catcher with any sort of upside hitting and is also cheap, is somebody I'm going to get to a lot because it's such a favorable position to punt. So Reese McGuire I'm getting to as my most rostered hitter just because of his price point. Mentioned him before, but I don't think there's anything else that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah, I think I feel like we've covered the slate officially. Oh, here we haven't talked about Boston at all going against Waka, and that's probably one to talk about a little bit, given that Boston has had success this week playing in Tampa Bay. And normally that's not what you're expecting. Roof closed. It's a pretty big park shift for Boston. It does have a power park, or at least one that plays for a little more power generally, and definitely more in the summer months. I think Boston, though, they are a little bit overowned in the top stacks tool, but they are a team that I would say, I don't know, this is clearly not a data point. They feel sneaky today, Greg. They feel sneaky going against Michael Wacha, who gives up a good power to both sides of the plate. This year, giving up a 284 batting average, which was actually the worst mark overall amongst a lot of these. Worst mark amongst the entire slate, it looks like. And also an 18% K rate, so he's not getting strikeouts. Boston, to me, is a team that I feel like, you're going to get a lot of teams here today. And we talked about, to me, like the Cincinnati team, probably the most underowned. I like that game environment a lot for both them and the Braves. But Boston, I wouldn't mind taking stabs here. And I think there's a chance the ownership isn't there as much as it looks like. Michael Chavez, certainly a discount up top here in the leadoff spot with 11% ownership and a $2,700 price tag on DraftKings. But I feel like going against Wacha, always a spot that I don't mind. And Boston, even though the park sucks, like I think they are one team that we haven't hit on that actually is probably worth just giving a cosign to and mentioning they're worth some exposure.
Yeah, I think the only time I mentioned them before actually was just in passing. They do have the most positive leverage score on FanDuel, so that's definitely a reason to get to them. Michael Wacha, a guy who's changed his outlook so often as a pitcher. So he was he's a guy just 2 years ago, Michael Wacha had a 48% ground ball rate with the Cardinals. And now this year he has a 36.8% ground ball rate. So he's gone from a really high ground ball pitcher now to a fly ball pitcher. Also, he used to be a guy who generated not a ton of strikeouts, but I mean, like last year he had a 23.7% strikeout rate. This year it's all the way down to 17.6. Also last year, he was a guy who lowered his walk rate from a career rate around 8% to 4.5%. And now his walk rate is about 50% higher this year than it was last year. So Michael Wacha has gone through a lot of transformations as a pitcher. Unfortunately, none of those versions have been good over the last 3 years, which, whatever.
Like an ugly butterfly.
Yeah, listen, he's trying. He's a guy who's like, hey, listen, I suck by giving up a lot of ground balls. Let's see if maybe I change my pitch mix and now I become more of a fly ball pitcher. Just like, hey, cool. Now this guy's hit a lot of balls hard in the air against me. But hey, listen, I respect him for trying, except, yeah, this does look like a fairly good spot to stack the Red Sox, particularly on FanDuel.
The one guy that Tampa Bay's analytics cannot solve and find a way to being useful, but bless his heart for continuing to try. And we didn't talk about the Tampa Bay Rays at all either. And I feel like I'll just ask if you have any of them at all. Wander Franco, we certainly gave a cosign to, or, I've talked about the last 2 days and understood the ownership, especially day one. Yesterday, too, being minimum salary. Now he's 3,800. So that's not really going to be the consideration as a one-off. It was the last few days. But do you get any Rays going against Pivetta? Because they do have 4.7 implied runs. And I know you weren't a Pivetta believer. So maybe there's some potential for them to at least have one-off power.
No, both sides of this game, meaning the pitcher and the offense. The Tampa Bay Rays offense, Nick Pivetta is a pitcher. At least for DraftKings purposes, I think Pivetta is way overpriced. FanDuel, more reasonable price tag on him. So if you wanted to roster him there, I think that's more sensible. But, from a pitcher perspective, I am pretty significantly underweight to the field to Pivetta. And then I don't have very many Rays stacks. I have 2 in total. So the Rays, not a team I'm really targeting, and Nick Pivetta I'm underweight to as a pitcher. So I guess I'm hoping for a spot where the Rays score like 3 to 4 runs and don't hit a lot of home runs or steal bases, and then Nick Pivetta just doesn't strike out a bunch of guys.
That seems like a reasonable take. So you guys got about 2 minutes left until lock, probably less by the time you hear that. And we might as well call it quits on this show. But we do have the NBA Live Before Lock show coming up in a little bit here. So make sure to go hang out on the channel. It'll be coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be Josh and Ryan doing the thing here. And Ryan, certainly Rinpack, one of the best players in the world at showdowns. He's going to give you all the insights that he has there, though. I got to say, Ryan had some tough takes yesterday. I mean, like Ryan and Eric, I love them both very much. But Eric was like, play Cam Johnson, not campaign the other day. And I was like, oh, Eric, you sweet boy. That didn't work out. But Ryan, though, has definitely the methodology that's always going to be competitive in showdowns. It's going to be worth checking him out today to hear what he has to say about the Clippers fighting off 3-0 tonight. And make sure also to check out Jock Market once again. The fun may stop here for DraftKings and FanDuel if you're not playing the night slates, but on Jock Market, it goes all night long while watching the actual baseball game. So go check them out. Jock MKT. And it's like it sounds. It's the stock market, but basically for fantasy players where you're buying and selling guys. Probably a little late for getting for the IPOs right now, but you can do that. You just buy and sell guys throughout games whenever you want to jump in. So go check them out. Download them in the App Store, Jock MKT. Use the promo code Awesemo for a $50 deposit match when you sign up. And Greg, anything you want to say here to close this out? Any final plugs for yourself? Obviously, you are doing content around the clock, so just say whatever you want. If you want to be nice to me too, you can do that too. Yeah. So here, I think in homage to you, let me bring up the list. We'll do it different with baseball way. My version of money time here. We're going to look at the top stacks tool in honor of Spags doing his last show here. For now, also here's a $2 bill. Money time. All right. I don't even know if that showed up. I don't even know if that showed up on camera. But I threw $2. It went up and never came back.
Yeah, it's stuck to the ceiling right now. It got stuck in like the air conditioning and just got sucked in. But all right, the most rostered offenses for tonight on DraftKings. We have the Houston Astros number 1 picking up 14.7% ownership share. The second most popular stack is the Toronto Blue Jays, 13.7%. And then the Atlanta Braves coming in third, 9.3% on FanDuel. The most rostered stacks for the day as it's loading on my screen. All right. The Toronto Blue Jays, 20.1% ownership share. Blue Jays become very popular today on FanDuel. Atlanta Braves, 14.5%. The Houston Astros, 14.3%. There it is, the closing money time.
I love you doing that one more time, though. It's worth pointing out I will be on Live Before Lock tomorrow with Terry. So it's my last show with Greg and Jordan Klein, two of my favorites to do shows with. So again, I probably will be back. I don't know. I'm taking a free agency period. I'm hanging out all summer and going to be playing with NFL projections. Still doing splash play with my pal Peter Overzet. So go follow me at Chris Spags. Check that out. Make sure to follow at G Ehrenberg DFS and follow at Awesemo_com, the show, the network, the website that brings you everything you need to know for both DFS and betting. Follow them, check them out, and check out all the content going on. And I'll be back tomorrow. I'll have a strategy show with Gundacker, then Live Before Lock with Terry. So get me for one more day with MLB before I go and continue and go on a sojourn. I don't know what the right phrase for that'll be. Appreciate you guys for watching, though. Have a great night. Good luck.